Hello YouTube, it's Chelzor the Destroyer, and we are going to watch a Defunctland Disney's Animatronics, A Living History. Grab your snackies, grab your bevies, let me know what you can drink down below, and let's get to watching. It's muted. I muted it.
There's something inside us.
A skeleton.
Has it always been this way? Since the beginning of recorded history, humanity has harbored a set of innate desires, ancient dreams that go beyond mere survival. For thousands of years, our species has hoped to accomplish such seemingly impossible tasks as achieving flight, controlling the elements, and mapping the stars. Among these is a less discussed but enduring ambition. The desire
Was I right about the skeleton comment?
to create life from machine. 4,000 years ago, ancient Egyptians devised speaking statues of their deities. These early mechanical figures could perform simple movements with jointed parts, such as the lifting of an arm or the turn of a head. The figures were supposedly operated by temple priests, who would speak to devout mortals on behalf of the gods, although in retrospect they were probably just improvising. In its time, this was impressive technology, but these statues required a live operator to achieve movement. Therefore, this was merely a form of puppetry. The hope remained for an autonomous device, a living machine, operated without the assistance of a human. This was the beginning of humanity's pursuit to achieve mechanical life.
Bum, bum, bum. One, this is definitely giving like modern marvels, but two, I feel like they put a lot of effort into this part. Day, God said, let us man. I can read. Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day.
The concept of a living machine appeared in legends far before the technology existed to support it. In the 8th century BCE, the Iliad, credited to the poet Homer, featured stories of Hephaestus, god of artisans and fire, who crafted automated tools, including female servants made of gold who had the ability to reason. Many credit Homer with introducing the Greek word automaton, which would become the Latin word automaton. Defined simply as self-moving, the term soon took on a more specific meaning, that of a moving mechanical device, meant to resemble and imitate a living organism. The idea of automatons began to appear in texts all around the world, seemingly independent of one another. In the 5th century BCE, Chinese philosopher Li Yuko was credited with writing a fictional story featuring an automaton. In the tale, a skilled craftsman showcased his creation, an impressive mechanical man, to King Mu of Chou. The automaton could talk, sing, walk, and dance, but the most frightening feature that it had was game. The mechanical man flirted with the king's courtesans, enraging him.
Oh no, it had Riz! It had mechanical Riz!
To defuse the situation, the craftsman opened the automaton and began disassembling him. He invited the king to do the same, and as he examined the body made of wood, glue, and strings, the king remarked, quote, "Could it be possible that human skill can produce something that can match what is created by heaven and earth?" Other philosophers saw promise in automatons. Aristotle, for instance, theorized that, quote, "If every instrument could accomplish its own work, chief workmen would not want servants, nor master slaves. implying that if automatons were skilled and abundant, they could constitute a majority of the workforce. While philosophers pondered the implications of
I mean, that is what they're trying to do.
automatons, their existence was becoming more of a possibility as technology progressed. Machines were becoming more detailed and precise, specifically those used in timekeeping and astronomy. Still, the prospect of creating a mechanical human, let alone a convincing one, was out of reach. The human body is large and heavy, but it has the ability to move in slow, smooth, and subtle ways. This makes it particularly difficult to replicate, especially with ancient machinery. However, there was one class of animal that made for a more achievable automaton: birds. To the human eye, birds move in a sharp, mechanical fashion, and their small form made their construction achievable. There are several stories of fabricated birds in ancient China and Greece, but the first true bird automaton might have been invented in the 5th century BCE by the mathematician Archytas. According to some sources, the wooden bird was able to fly several hundred meters on
Yo-ho CHRLZ in chat.
Hey, Itchy Beard, thank you for the resubscription. Appreciate it. How's it going?
its own, through the use of an internal balloon that was filled with compressed air or steam. When released, the bird would be launched, possibly on a wire, with the escaping gas propelling the bird down the line. More realistic interpretations of the device argue that if Archytas did create the bird, it likely utilized a hidden counterweight. When the compressed air was released, the bird became lighter, causing the counterweight to fall and the bird to fly to a higher branch in a tree. Regardless of how the bird functioned, it was not being puppeteered by a human. It was moving on its own accord. It was an automaton, one of, if not the first, of its kind. Over the next millennia, automata progressed alongside mechanics. In 50 AD, Hero of Alexandria published several descriptions of mechanical birds and miniature human figures. 8 centuries later, the Banu Musa brothers published the Book of Ingenious Devices, a work filled with descriptions of ingenious automata. In 1206, Ismail al-Jazari published the Book of Knowledge of Ingenious Mechanical Devices, which built off of the Banu Musa brothers' work, and introduced a new device, the elephant clock. This famous clock, timed with a bucket slowly sinking into a pool of
Oh, is it like an early cuckoo clock kind of thing?
water, featured multiple animated figures which would perform every half hour. Al-Jazari's book also detailed several servant automatons and even a mechanical band. In the late 13th century, the advent of the fully
Sorry, it's just like mechanical band, and it's like a Disney thing, and I'm just having flashbacks of Country Bear Jamboree. Like, I just like, oh God, I'm just having like immediate like, I don't want to be here anymore.
mechanical clock resulted in a surge in mechanical figures. Beautiful, complex timekeepers were installed in cathedrals and palaces, often featuring human and animal figures springing to life to signify the arrival of an interval of time. The Renaissance also brought forth a host of mechanical innovations. Leonardo da Vinci designed several automatons, including a lion who could walk and a knight who could move multiple limbs. In the 17th century, French philosopher René Descartes was rumored to have designed automatons, including the unverifiable rumor that he had constructed one of a small child as a replacement for his young daughter, who had died of scarlet fever at the age of 5. While it is not known whether it was actually built, this is one of the first mentions of automata being used not simply to create life, but to resurrect it. In his writings, Descartes often grappled with the concept of automata, not simply speculating that machines could be made to appear as living organisms, but theorizing that living organisms might function no differently than machines. He believed that a perfect automata of an animal would be indistinguishable from a real one. Descartes attempted to clarify in his argument that humans could never be fully replicated, outlining a test to distinguish
Dude's trying to make like the bird drones for the government.
man from machine. In this same discourse, Descartes coined his most famous idea, Je pense donc je suis, or in English, I think, therefore I am. Living during the Inquisition, Descartes' writings on existentialism were radical and dangerous, and after hearing of Galileo's conviction by the Roman Catholic Church, Descartes chose to abandon publishing additional ideas on the subject. Descartes' writings on the line between man and machine would become even more relevant in the next century, as the true age of automatons was about to begin.
I mean, that's fair. I would also be like, oh, they killing motherfuckers? I'm just gonna shut up. I'm just gonna stop having anything to do with that thought process. Nope. It's not what I'm doing. I don't know what you're talking about.
In 1738, French inventor Jacques de Vaucanson would set up an attraction in a grand showroom in Paris. Charging a fee to small groups, Vaucanson would present a new invention, an automaton unlike any the world had seen. Resembling Antoine Quosevau's marble statue, the flute-playing shepherd, Vaucanson's automaton was 5.5 feet tall, and it sat atop a 4.5-foot tall pedestal. Powered by weights, the shepherd could not only move, but it could perform, playing 12 different melodies on the flute. The instrument was not an illusion. The flute player blew air into a real flute, changing its fingering, mouth position, and wind speed to accurately play the music. This was achieved.
That is absolutely bonkers, actually. Like, this thing was made out of, what did it say? Marbles? Marble? That's crazy.
Using a complex series of bellows, gears, and pipes, with most of the mechanisms being contained in the pedestal below the statue. The largest piece of the machine was a cylinder, known as a camshaft. The cylinder featured a series of ridges and bumps. Several cam followers read these as the cylinders rotated, synchronizing the many pieces to create the programmed movements. In order for the mechanical hands of the flute player to accurately finger the notes on the instrument, Vaucanson had to use real skin on the hands, or maybe this was not necessary for the machine.
Oh, okay. I don't love that, to be honest with you. Maybe not the biggest fan of that little fact, but
to play the instrument, and Vaucanson just wanted to use real skin on the hands. As impressive as the automaton was, it was also disconcerting, and not just because it used real skin on the hands.
Uncanny Valley.
Musicians were worried of the machine's ramifications on their profession. Some criticized the automaton's technique, but many untrained listeners could not detect the faults. From a philosophical perspective, the machine was most notable for its human-like movements. Specifically, since it was made to play a wind instrument, Vaucanson had to design the device so that air would blow out of the figure's mouth. The result, as many pointed out, was that the figure literally breathed. The French writer Voltaire labeled Vaucanson the new Prometheus. The following year, Vaucanson debuted 2 additional automatons. Another musician.
They're gonna be like, in the following year, he was found murdered. And I was like, yeah, crazy. Like, just.
This one capable of playing the pipe and tabor, and a mechanical gold-plated duck. The duck was capable of several lifelike movements, including eating grain and defecating it. Vaucanson claimed that there was a complex chemical system that achieved the digestion, but it would be revealed a century later that it was merely a hidden compartment that would release dyed breadcrumbs to appear as feces. Shortly after debuting these machines, Vaucanson took a position in the French government and claimed to be working on his most advanced automaton yet, an anatomically correct human being. Vaucanson would never finish this work, abandoning the project after becoming disgusted by it, with no additional context given.
Dude was out here being Frankenstein, probably. Or coming close to it.
Vaucanson's 3 automatons, which he sold and would continue to be displayed, were widely influential. French philosopher Julien Offray de la Mettrie would assert in his work L'Homme Machine, or Man a Machine, what René Descartes a century earlier did not, that humans are no different than animals, and that humans function no differently than a machine. His views, which made reference to Vaucanson's work, were seen as extremely controversial, and La Mettrie was forced to flee France because of them. Automatons continued to be innovated past Vaucanson. By 1774, Pierre Jacques-Idreau and his son Henri-Louis Jacques-Idreau constructed 3 brilliant automatons: a musician capable of playing the organ, a writer capable of composing sentences, and a draftsman capable of drawing pictures. These automatons are remarkable for several reasons, most notably that they have survived and still function today. The mechanisms of the 3 figures are contained almost entirely within their bodies, a significant improvement on Vaucanson's figures, which relied on pedestals to conceal the machinery. Perhaps the most impressive and prophetic of any automaton from this era, the writer could be programmed to write any sentence without changing the inner workings of the figure. Within the boy's back, along a complex camshaft, existed the ability to write any letter, as well as spaces and punctuation. The shape of the letter key would change the position of the cam, so that the cam followers lined up with the corresponding letter. The result is one of the earliest programmable machines. Some of the most infamous sentences.
That's like insane. That's bonkers. How do you set it? How do you like... How? How do you make it do the thing? Like, how do you set up the sentence, you know?
Is that the automaton was made to write over the years include references to Descartes' philosophical writings, including I think, therefore I am, and the far more eerie, I do not think, therefore do I not exist. In 1769, Hungarian...
This picture is unsettling. Like, I don't know why. I think it's how they do the shading of the face.
Inventor Wolfgang von Kempelen debuted an automaton nicknamed the Turk. This automaton was touted as being an intelligent machine, capable of playing chess. The Turk toured the world, playing prominent chess players and dignitaries, including United States Ambassador Benjamin Franklin. The Turk usually won its match, astounding the opposing player and spectators. While containing some automata, the Turk was primarily a hoax, with a hidden chess player below, following the game above, and puppeteering the figure's arm. Some of Kempelen's other inventions achieved their intended purpose more legitimately. Over the course of 2 decades, Kempelen developed a speaking machine.
Listen, dude was a scam artist. Like, I don't care. Based on that one thing, dude was a scam artist.
Like Wilkinson's flute player, this device used bellows and manipulated airflow to manually reproduce the sounds of human speech. Kempelen was not the only one experimenting in speech synthesis during this era. French inventor Abbé Michel and engineer Christian Gottlieb Kratzenstein also developed machines that replicated the mechanics and resulting sounds of human vocal cords, with Michel routing the sounds out of 2 sculpted heads. Michel and Kempelen's machines were capable of producing both vowel and consonant sounds, which some sources say could produce hundreds of words and speak multiple languages. French writer Antoine Rivarol, upon...
How, though? Like, how vocal cords work is a little weird. So I'm like, how do you get like a machine to do that? I don't know. Okay.
Hearing the Machines, wrote that the new technology would allow for the perfect preservation of 18th century French for the rest of time. Several reproductions of Kempelen's speaking machine have been created, so today we can hear exactly how the people of France sounded in the 1700s. French is a beautiful language.
Okay. As you can see, or rather, as you can hear,
Other inventors attempted to improve on this design, attempting to build automata that...
You know what?
French...
That's the kind of shit you hear walking around outside in the evening or at like night. Like just weird shit, and it's just a weird fucking animal. It's like a fox or like a mountain lion or a bobcat or like some weird fucking deer or something. Like, you know? Like, that's the shit you hear in the woods or just like out and about in the country. And like, and you're like, maybe I will go home, actually.
is a beautiful language. Over the coming centuries, other inventors attempted to improve on this design, attempting to build automata that could both move and speak like a human. For every significant feat in automata, there were thousands of other, less remarkable, but far more replicable automatons created and sold. Small music boxes with animated figures were created by skilled craftsmen and sold as luxury items. Birds were again a common staple of this art form, with wind-up boxes and miniature cages featuring singing mechanical avians.
Have you guys ever seen the Silver Swan? It's in a museum somewhere, and it's a very old automaton, actually. And it's just a swan. It's like a wind up, like not necessarily a music box, I guess, because it's like really big, but like it's like a wind up automaton or whatever of a swan, and it just kind of, it still moves, it still works today, but it's really impressive. If I don't know if he's gonna talk about it in here, but if he doesn't, you guys should look it up because it's really impressive. Automatons
were created and distributed by people all over the world.
I don't I didn't like that one. I don't like this one.
Resulting in this period, from the mid-1800s to the early 1900s, being referred to as the Golden Age of Automata. While the volume of mechanical figures would peak during this period, the complexity and innovation of the 18th century was rarely matched. In many ways, this age of automaton innovation had been ushered out by the Industrial Revolution.
Sure.
As journalist Gabby Wood explained, quote, "Makers of automata turned away from constructing curiosity in order to design the machines that would replace human labor. Apart from a few scattered attempts at making these industrial devices appear human, such as Diedrich's Steam Man, automaton innovation ceased. But this was not the end of humanity's pursuit for mechanical life, as the definition of automaton was soon given an additional qualifier, a moving mechanical device meant to resemble and imitate a living being without the use of electricity." In the late 19th century,
Bum, bum, bum.
humanity began the decades-long transition to a world based on electricity. This transformed practically.
What are these called? What are these called? Tesla coils? Tesla coils? That was hard to say. I don't know why. Have you guys heard like music being played on Tesla coils? Tesla coils is super neat. Like when they make music with it, I just like it. I think it's neat.
A decades-long transition to a world based on electricity. This transformed practically every aspect of human existence, and it resulted in a class of inventions that appeared as miracles to the public. The electric age was dominated by two names, Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison. Edison's electromechanical inventions would have an enormous impact on the future of automata, but the most immediate impact he would have on living machines was the invention of the phonograph, a device capable of recording and playing back sound. In 1877, the same year that Edison invented the machine, he began contemplating its commercial uses, speculating how it might be integrated into children's toys. Over a decade later, Edison hired a manufacturer to create and distribute a talking doll. This small figure had a miniature phonograph placed inside, with cylindrical wax records. When a child turned the crank, a voice would emit from inside of the doll, singing one of 12 songs. Some of these records have been preserved, and recently, the contents have been reproduced. Terrifying. The products were
Okay, good. It's not just me where I'm like, think about being in like an old house that's kind of like not in the best shape, and you just fucking hear that in the distance. Like in the next room over in the hallway or some shit. That's like haunted house shit, man. Like, that's okay, we gotta leave. Like, just, no thanks.
poorly designed and manufactured, and as a result, the dolls flopped, with Edison abandoning were poorly designed.
We'll tell you how the baseball game came out if you look in the windows of the Edison talking doll will tell you how the baseball game came out if you look in the windows of the New York Bazaar. What the? I thought it had like pre-recorded songs. Why is it talking to you about a baseball game?
And manufactured, and as a result, the dolls flopped, with Edison abandoning plans for a second generation. Shortly after the dolls failed,
yeah, here's the thing. If I'm in a haunted house and I hear that noise, and whether or not I'm like, that's a fucking ghost or a demon or some shit, or that's a fucking wild-ass animal, I'm still leaving because there's a wild-ass animal that might have rabies or something in there with me. And it's making weird fucking noises. Like, I'm out. Thank you.
phonograph cylindrical records would be used in another entertainment device, fortune-telling machines. These figures had extremely limited movements, but their ability to play back different lines of dialogue produced a novelty that would become a staple of boardwalks and amusement parks. While not the most technically impressive, moving figures with human voices began to populate the world. This, along with other electrical innovations, elicited both wonder and fear from the public, sentiments that soon found a home in the emerging genre of science fiction. In 1920, Czech writer Karel Čapek wrote a play named RUR, in which artificial humans created for the purposes of labor rebel, resulting in the extinction of humanity. The play was a massive hit around the world and is most famous for introducing the word robot. The play instilled a fear in the public of an apocalyptic robotic uprising, as well as further worries of intelligent machines displacing humans in the workforce. It also inspired many to experiment with robotics. Some of these early 20th century creations appeared in a humanoid shape, but were obviously machines, with visible screws and metal casing. While the robots in Chapek's play appeared as human, it would be these metal beings that would be commonly referred to as robots. Other inventors took a different approach. After watching Chapek's play, Japanese biologist Makoto Nishimura built his own robot, named Gakuten Soku. Nishimura's goal was to design a friendly machine that would be an optimistic companion to humanity, not a slave or an aggressor as the ones depicted in Chapek's play. Nishimura gave his robot skin made of rubber, and the machine was capable of moving its arms, turning its head, and most impressively, creating facial expressions. Gakuten Soku could smile by a mechanism that raised the corners of his mouth. This type of machine, that was wrapped in an artificial skin and made to appear as a human, would be more commonly referred to as an android. Robots and androids.
Okay. Love that they gave it like rubber skin as opposed to like whatever skin they were using before. Also, though, consider both things, both like skin, leather, rubber, whatever. Think of it when it breaks down and gets weathered and old because it's been around for a while. Like, that would be so upsetting to see in any way, shape, or form, Like, just it kind of like breaking down and like cracking and like wearing down and stuff. Like, that would be kind of terrifying, Like, I just want to put that out there. Think of those things breaking down over time. Not even necessarily breaking down. Just like, things wearing down over time.
Androids appeared frequently in media, but infrequently in reality over the coming decades. They were most often built to showcase a specific technology, not as an end product themselves. The creation of new, non-electric mechanical automatons was rare, and the surviving pieces had become antiques, fetching high prices from wealthy collectors. The products of a once thriving art form now sat, often frozen, in museums and antique stores throughout the world, a reminder of the promise of mechanical life, now seen by many as the limit. But it was in one of these antique stores that the next step in the search for a living machine would begin. In 1949, in an antique store in New Orleans, a preserved automaton of a bird perched inside of a golden cage performed once again, flapping its wings and whistling a song. The sudden change in state, from still to full of life, enamored its potential customer, a filmmaker from California, Walt Disney. Walt purchased the strange bird, and after returning home, he brought it into his studio's machine shop, handed it to one of his employees, and instructed him to open it up and figure out how it worked.
But also don't break it. Because I'm gonna be mad. Talking heads. The man does not do what is good. It is not the fault of the basic good of which man is constituted.
At 47 years old, famed cartoonist Walt Disney was beginning to lose his passion for animation. The 1940s had been a tumultuous decade at his studio. The animators' strike in 1941, the struggles during World War II, and the mixed reception to the studio's recent films had caused Walt to become disillusioned with the medium that had made him a household name. Adding to this discontentment, Walt was forced to quit the sport of polo after suffering a severe injury in 1938, depriving him of the hobby that he enjoyed outside of the studio. As a result, Walt was forced to redirect his energy toward new passions, and he began to gravitate toward one specific fascination: trains. A lifelong interest in locomotives was quickly becoming an obsession, one that he shared with several of his studio employees. Naturally, many of those that had a passion for trains were the machinists and technicians working at the Disney Studio machine shop.
Okay. This thing is bonkers cool, though. If it is what I think it is. basically something that they made. I don't know if they're going to go over this, but something that they made in order to create depth in like their movies or whatever is they would have they would paint different layers of a scene on glass. And they're the first ones that ever did this. They would paint different layers of a scene on glass. So like, and they would put like a camera on the top and zoom in. So they're zooming through like the different layers of it to create depth in animation. And so like, if this is what I think it is, there's different like cells, I guess, painted on glass panes for the camera to zoom in on. Like it's so neat. It's so cool. Anyway, sorry. I just thought that was really, really cool.
This department was tasked with developing many of the machines that were used in the animation process. In the late 1940s, Walt began to spend more time at the machine shop, discussing his growing collection of model trains with his new friends/employees. It was common for hobbyists to place their train sets within an environment made up of scale models. This might be why Walt began to develop a second fascination with sculpting miniatures. In 1949, Walt discovered the automaton bird in New Orleans, and it was at this point that all of his interests seemed to coalesce into a new type of project, a program show of moving mechanical miniatures, a type of three-dimensional animation that he would refer to as Disneylandia. Walt enlisted animator Ken Anderson, removing him from the Walt Disney Productions payroll and instead paying Anderson himself out of his own pocket. Anderson recalled that the pet project was, in part, derived out of Walt's frustrations with the other animators. Walt explained to Anderson, quote, "I'm tired of all you artists doing all the drawing and painting around here. You know, I can draw and paint myself. I'm going to do something creative too." Walt and Anderson worked together to design and sculpt a series of three-dimensional scenes. The intention was that each model would have programmed movement and synchronized sound. When a person inserted a coin into the machine, the models would come to life. The concepts that Walt and Anderson developed all had a similar style and tone, with the exhibits all featuring elements of nostalgia or Americana, with both Disney films and Norman Rockwell paintings serving as inspiration. The first Disneylandia scene that
Carousel of Progress. Are you going to explain to me Carousel of Progress?
the two created depicted Granny Kincaid's cabin from the Disney film So Dear to My Heart. The scene featured Granny sitting in her chair, which would rock back and forth as dialogue and music played. Walt would assist in sculpting this scene, but as Anderson explained, he, quote, wasn't any good at it.
Aw.
And Walt soon enlisted sculptor Charles Cristodoro to help with the project. Around the same time, Walt assigned the automaton bird to another animator and model train enthusiast, Wathel Rogers. Rogers was tasked with studying the automaton in and out. He pried open the bird's minuscule components, comparing it to deconstructing a piece of jewelry. When he was done inspecting the bird's innards, Rogers reconstructed the automaton so that it could perform once again. Satisfied with Rogers' work, Walt pulled him away from his animation duties, along with the head of the studio machine shop, Roger Broggie. Walt assigned Broggie and Rogers to another Disneylandia model, one that featured movement far more complex than that of Granny Kincaid's cabin. The new scene, nicknamed Project Little Man, was to feature a 9-inch high performer dancing on a stage. Walt asked actor and dancer Buddy Ebsen to come into the studio to record a performance, filming Ebsen on a grid so that the animators could study his movements. As was common with automata, Rogers and Broggie utilized a large camshaft to program the figure's movements. When a bump was registered on the surface, a wire was moved to create a single action, such as the lifting of a foot. Anderson would construct a third Disneylandia scene, depicting a barbershop quartet singing in a barbershop. With several proofs of concept in the works, Walt proposed a way to showcase the models around the country. His plan was to place the exhibits, and you'll never believe this, on a train. The models would be installed in Pullman train cars, and viewers in cities around the United States would be able to travel to their train station to see the exhibit. Rogers, Broggie,
I mean, that's a pretty good idea, I think, especially at the time. Like, that's a great idea. Like, it's like a moving museum or whatever. That's neat.
and Anderson were able to get multiple prototypes to work, including the small figure in Project Little Man, which did appear to dance. However, the machines were severely limited by several factors. For one, programming the movements by adjusting the ridges on the camshaft was tedious and frustrating.
Yeah.
The number of movements and the length of the performance was limited to the size of the camshaft. The camshaft also had to be placed close to the figure, and Broggie and Rogers had already made it quite large. After months of work, the team felt that they had met the limits of the technology and their own ability. Broggie explained to Walt that they were, quote, no further advanced than the 17th and 18th century kings of France who had commissioned the creation of little automatons that played musical instruments. It was an unfortunate reality. You will never do anything better than an 18th century monk when you have a TV in your house. Even if Rogers and Broggie had dedicated the time necessary to master the craft of automata, the complexity of Walt's request was simply not achievable within the medium. Broggie proposed a solution. If Walt were to make a life-sized human figure, then more modern and advanced mechanisms could be placed inside of the body. This would result in more detail and lifelike movements. Walt considered the possibilities of Broggie's suggestion and responded to the idea with one of his most commonly spoken phrases: no. The point of the miniatures, according to Walt, was that they are cute. They were magical because they were small. Making them life-size would defeat the purpose of the exhibits. Besides, it was determined that the project was far too expensive, as the income generated by the coin-operated machines would not offset the projected maintenance costs. This might have been more demoralizing to Walt if he was not already working on another project, one with a similar tone, similar goals, and soon, a similar name to Disneylandia. It was to be an amusement park with elaborate themed environments and immersive storytelling. Walt had been dreaming of a place like it for
What? Crazy. Wonder what that was called. Wonder where that's located.
years, because he wanted to create a place where parents and children could have fun together, and/or he wanted another, bigger train. Disneyland Park opened
And/or he wanted another bigger train that he could ride whenever he felt like it.
on July 17th, 1955. The theme park was designed by WED Enterprises, a new company that Walt had staffed mainly by poaching employees from his studio. Several of these artists and engineers were those that had been recruited to work on Disneylandia, including Anderson, Broggie, and Rogers. These designers would eventually be given the unique title of Imagineer. Over several years, Walt and the Imagineers worked diligently, designing a theme park unlike the world had ever seen. When guests first entered Disneyland, they were able to wander through nostalgic environments and ride unique attractions. They would also have the opportunity to interact with classic Disney characters, such as Mickey Mouse, Minnie Mouse.
Yeah, early Mickey and Minnie Mouse outfits, horrendous. Like, terrifyingly horrendous. Like, I get it, but nightmare stuff. Jesus.
Minnie Mouse, Black Bart, the Phantom of the Opera, the Main Street Monkey, Aunt Jemima, and Goofy.
So the Aunt Jemima, like why he said it. I get why he said it like that, but it just made me laugh. It's like, oh my god.
The Opera, the Main Street Monkey, Aunt Jemima, and Goofy. Along with these costumed characters, guests would encounter several mechanical characters throughout their Disneyland day. In Fantasyland, dark rides themed to Disney's animated films featured simple animated figures. These characters had minimal looped movement, and each was seen only briefly as the ride vehicles whipped around the
Freaking Mr. Toad's Wild Ride.
track. In Frontierland, along the shores of the rivers of America, a Native American village featured multiple animated human figures, including a chief mounted on a horse. This figure was capable of raising its arm to guests as they passed by on the riverboat. But by far the most impressive examples of mechanical life in early Disneyland could be found on a single ride in Adventureland, the Jungle Cruise. Since the earliest concepts of the park, Walt had envisioned a boat ride themed to the dense river jungles of the world. Originally, Walt wanted actual wild animals to live on the shores of the attraction, but abandoned the concept because of its logistical hurdles and guest-killing potential.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely a hurdle.
Instead, Walt and the Imagineers opted to build detailed figures capable of movement, unlike the exaggerated animal designs found in Disney's famous.
Also, it's also kind of hard to, like, force an animal to be in a specific area. I know they have, like, tricks for that in, like, Animal Kingdom, but that's like, hey, the rocks in the lion exhibit, like, certain rocks literally are air conditioned, so that's why they hang out there, because it's hot and it's like freaking Florida, so they hang out where the air conditioning is, or whatever the hell. Like, were they doing that back in the day? Like,
Animations, the Jungle Cruise animals were carefully sculpted and painted to appear as real animals, and the mechanisms held within them assisted in this illusion. These animals could wiggle, lunge, nod, chomp, and bite, and chew, and chomp, and bite. The way in which these figures moved was less precise than the detailed cam work of the Disneylandia figures. But what the animals lacked in complexity, they made up for in size and creative staging. The most common mechanisms found in the Jungle Cruise animals were cams and levers, and cranks and sliders. Both have the ability to turn rotary motion into linear motion, allowing for a constant short program to be looped indefinitely. Many of the attraction's land animals contained all of their mechanisms internally and could be seen in full view. Others, such as the original giraffes, cheated a bit. Only the long necks and heads of the animals could be seen peeking out above the foliage, while the mechanisms below were hidden by the brush. A similar example of this staging could be found in the rhino scene, in which 2 baby rhinos ran around and played. This was accomplished by only building the top half of each animal, allowing the bottom half to contain wheels that would run along a track. The most unique mechanisms of the Jungle Cruise were not found within the ride's jungle, but rather, they were submerged in the attraction's river. To allow guests to have close encounters with several semi-aquatic animals, large metal structures were constructed and installed before the river was filled. In order for hippos to emerge from beneath the water, the sculpted figures were attached to metal carriages that accordioned up, enough for the figure to go from completely submerged to visible above the waterline.
See, this is just really neat, and I'm just, like, sad that I feel like a lot of, like, the magical cleverness feels like it's been sucked out of the parks. Like, it just feels really just, let's make as much money as possible. And, like, I get it to a point, but, like, this is neat as hell. Like, how can we do this? How can we accomplish this thing? Let's do it this way. Let's do it this way. Like, it's just, and it's, like, practical stuff, and it's not just, like, hey, let's just project faces on this, like, faceless doll. You know? I don't like the projected faces.
The ride skipper would shoot the hippos with a gun loaded with blanks, one of the first examples of a machine being used to simulate both life and death. This famous scene would have been very interesting in the version of the ride where this was a real animal. Some lucky guests even got to witness Walt Disney fire the gun at the mechanical figure, a bespoke experience in which you could visit Disneyland and see Walt Disney fire a gun.
Well, there's a beat the Aztecs never heard of.
It would be like going to Walgreens and seeing Charles R. Walgreen fire a gun. Other aquatic figures
Yeah, that's what it'd be like.
included the charging crocodiles, which rolled along a hidden looping track. These clever illusions resulted in an attraction that was full of animal life. As a result, the Jungle Cruise was seen as Disneyland's most impressive attraction when the park debuted.
And now it's full of puns. Just overwhelmingly full of puns.
In the years following Disneyland's opening, the Imagineers would add more exotic animals to the Jungle Cruise, as well as populate Frontierland's wilderness with similar creatures native to North America. The area's train ride, the Rainbow Caverns Mine Train, was updated to the new Mine Train Through Nature's Wonderland, which featured scenes of elk fighting, beavers building dams, and bears scratching on a tree. The area also featured figures in the water, including fish jumping out of the river and bears swimming and eating fish. The plussing of both the Jungle Cruise and the Mine Train were led by Mark Davis, an animator that Walt was consistently recruiting to work on Disney attractions. Davis was exceptionally gifted in his ability to turn simple movements into realistic and often humorous scenes.
I don't think this train ride is still there. Like, the Jungle Cruise is still there, but, like, it's kind of different, right? Because now it's a bunch of puns. They don't fire guns anymore. At least I don't think they do. And, like, that kind of stuff. I don't think this train one still exists. To be fair, I've only been to Disneyland once, though. So I don't... And, like, y'all know I have, like, the worst memory. So I don't know. You can, if, like, you've been multiple times, you can tell me, like, whether or not it still is, but I don't think it does. Some of the track is still there, but hidden. Okay. Like, I know Walt Disney World has this big railroad, which I was gonna ride this past time and didn't. But, like, it has its, like, railroad that goes around kind of the park, and I think it has, like, 3 stops within the park. I I assume Disneyland also has a railroad, but I could be wrong.
While Disneyland's environments were coming to life with a plethora of artificial animals, Walt began to explore new concepts for attractions in which mechanical humans would be the star. Throughout the late 1950s, 2 new themed areas were being considered for Disneyland. Both of these would be additions to Main Street USA, and both would feature shows starring animated human figures as their primary attraction. One proposal, named Liberty Street, would have been themed to colonial America. The main attraction of this area was to be a show named One Nation Under God, that would include the Hall of Presidents, a stage in which figures of every U.S. president would come to life. Another proposed...
This is terrible. If you're in Disney World, so I've only done this in Disney World, and you need a nap, the Hall of Presidents is dark, it's air conditioned, and it kind of takes a while. So you definitely nap in there. It's a good midday nap spot. Sorry.
Annex of Main Street was named Edison Square. This area would have been focused on the emergence of electricity, juxtaposing Main Street's nostalgic gas lamps with a street full of electric lights. The main attraction of Edison Square would have been Harnessing the Lightning. This show would have tracked the progress of electricity throughout the 20th century, focusing on multiple scenes of a family demonstrating advances in household appliances.
Carousel of Progress!
The challenge with both attractions would be animating the life-sized human figures. The Imagineers were aware of the mechanical limitations, and both shows were planned with limited movement in mind. Both One Nation Under God and Harnessing the Lightning would utilize dynamic lighting, so that not every animated figure was visible at once. This would allow each character to be revealed throughout a sequence, cutting down on the amount of time that a guest could see a figure's animation loop. The Hall of Presidents segment of One Nation Under God had the advantage of scale. 33 presidents would be depicted at once, so even if each had only the ability to turn their heads, the crowd effect would hide the rudimentary motion. Harnessing the Lightning would have had guests walk from room to room between acts, and each act would have been short, around 3 minutes each. The characters would have been staged to hold household appliances, which would allow them to perform machine-like movements while still appearing human. To further help with the illusion, Imagineer John...
The talking machine is no longer a curiosity, it's not even a novelty, it has made for itself a place in almost in every home and is the most popular entertainer in the world. The talking machine of today is a musical instrument and better than any other musical instrument because it combines them all, a whole band or orchestra. Today, the Waldorf Astoria, New York City's most famous hotel, the mecca of wealth and fashion, entertains its guests at luncheon with a tapering arm disc talking machine, an ideal musical instrument for home use, a perpetual entertainer, an ever-ready source of pleasure and amusement.
Hench suggested that the humans be depicted in a caricaturized style, to prevent them from coming across as lifeless. These solutions would help to sell the illusion of life, even if the show were to use mechanisms as crude as those found on the Jungle Cruise. Still, this was a compromise to Walt's vision for both shows, and despite the Imagineers dedicating years of work to both Liberty Street and Edison Square, neither concept would come to fruition. Instead, Walt focused the park's funds and the Imagineers' energy on other expansions, such as a major addition to the Tomorrowland section of the park. But the idea of attractions with human figures lingered. The technology just wasn't there. At least, not yet. What happened next is a bit uncertain. It was at this point, around 1959, that the Studio Machine Shop began experimenting with building a mechanical human head. The first head to be created was of a man of Chinese descent. There are 3 theories as to why this occurred. In the most popular account of events, Walt walked into the Studio Machine Shop one day with a new idea, another new themed area for Main Street USA. He said, quote, "Look, I want to have a Chinese restaurant at the park. Out in the lobby will be an old Chinese fellow like Confucius. Not an actor, but a figure made out of plastic. Now the customers will ask him questions, and he'll reply with words of wisdom." While at first this seems random, fortune-telling machines were abundant, and a few were already in Disneyland. Fortune-telling machines often depicted Confucius or another Eastern philosopher, so the idea of a Chinatown with a fortune-telling Confucius could be a natural evolution of this common fixture of amusement parks. The second theory is that machinist Jack Gladish was experimenting with a talking head in the Studio Machine Shop, either as his own personal project or because Walt had assigned it to him in preparation for one of the complex shows in development. According to historian Todd James Pierce, Gladish built a functioning prototype skull. However, when it came time to place the fake skin on the head, the latex material did
I hate the way this thing looks. I hate it. Also, that's just a snap in its skin. Those are snaps. These are snaps. I guess you snap the skin on. I don't like the eyes. I don't like a lot of things about this.
Did not fit properly around the eyes. The figure appeared to them to be of Chinese descent, and so Gladish and the machine shop decided to proceed with the imperfection and pretend as though it was purposeful. After presenting it to Walt, the Chinatown concept was invented to support the team's progress on the figure. The third theory as to why a Chinese head was developed is that Disneyland was simply missing something. It already had caricatures and fear-based depictions of Africans and Native Americans, but it had no such material for the people of Asia. Therefore, a Chinese figure was developed to address this racist omission, as in an omission of racism, not an omission that was racist. Regardless of the reason, a mechanical figure was designed for a proposed Chinese restaurant. The theory that Roger Broggie had proposed almost a decade prior was turning out to be correct. A larger figure did indeed allow for more lifelike movement. The machine shop was able to fit multiple solenoids inside of the mechanical head. A solenoid is an electromagnetic mechanism created by winding a copper wire into a coil. When electricity passes through the wire, a magnetic field is created, pulling the plunger into the coil. When the current is interrupted, a spring returns the plunger to its resting position. The benefit of solenoids are that they are small, fast, and easily controlled with electricity. The downside is that their load capacity is limited, making them less suitable for lifting heavy objects compared to other methods. For the mechanical head, this was not an issue, as the solenoids would be used for simple, small movements, such as the opening of the mouth or the raising of the cheeks. Walt wanted realism out of the head from the beginning, suggesting specific facial expressions and complex mouth movements. Walt explained to the team, quote, "You know they've done this in Europe for hundreds of years. If they've done this well, we can do things now much better." He instructed the team to watch television with the sound turned off, in order to study the way that people's mouths moved when they spoke. Wathel Rogers recalled, quote, "You could always tell who was working on the job. They never looked at your eyes when you were talking to them, always at your mouth." One of the most significant obstacles the Imagineers faced with the
Was the skin ripping, I guess? Oh, God, so unsettling.
mechanical figure was the skin. The latex used for the initial prototypes was not flexible or durable enough to last on the talking head, and Imagineer Harriet Burns had to constantly create new skin when one inevitably peeled and deteriorated. The Imagineers soon turned to a unique hot melt vinyl named Duraflex, which had properties that more closely resembled the flexibility and durability of human skin. The material also lent itself better to repairs if an issue did arise. While the mechanically inclined studio shop designed the Chinese head, the creatives at WED began to write the show for the Chinese restaurant. Disneyland performer Wally Bogue was recruited to help develop the attraction, which would feature several mechanical characters to support the Confucius figure. After guests had finished their meal, a dragon statue mounted to the wall of the dining room would suddenly come to life and speak. The voice would have been Bogue doing a stereotypical Chinese accent. The dragon would say, quote, "Honorable patrons look very happy. Must have been something you ate." The show's main character would have been the Chinese human figure. Confucius was used as a reference, but the character itself would have been a fictional philosopher. One of the proposed names for the character was Grandfather Chung, as Disney hoped to secure a sponsorship from canned Chinese food brand Chun King, although this pitch would not have been helped by the fact that they misspelled Chun.
Have fun. Go Cantonese. Okay.
The other name considered for the restaurant's wise sage was Chew Well.
Ha.
The philosopher would have been surrounded by mechanical birds, who would coo and sing as he delivered his philosophical teachings. He would begin his discourse with, quote, "Now
Also, Tiki Room. I feel like they're leading up to like the Carousel of Progress and the Tiki Room.
Now that you have dined on food, it is time to dine on knowledge." Walt wanted the figure to be operated live by a hidden performer, who would respond to questions from the audience. The Imagineers might have determined that this would be more difficult than creating a program show. To address Walt's suggestion, they planned to pipe audio of canned audience questions into the room, in the hopes of fooling the real diners into believing that another patron had posed the question. For instance, a pre-recorded voice of a young girl would ask the philosopher why her father thinks that she talks too much, to which the philosopher would respond, quote, "Every young girl should be the picture of her mother, but not the soundtrack." Another line of wisdom from the philosopher was, quote, "Psychology books very handy if applied right, suggest 3 brisk strokes overhead of child." A white man doing his version of a Chinese accent while delivering jokes about child beating would have absolutely murdered a crowd in 1950s Disneyland, but it would not have the opportunity due to Walt's sudden and swift cancellation of the Chinatown area of the park. Despite the project being far into development, Walt apparently met with the team and declared, quote, "We're not going to do Chinatown. San Francisco and Los Angeles already have Chinatowns. There's no need for one at Disneyland."
Okay.
Chinatown and its restaurant were no more, but the development of an animated human figure would not cease. The progress made on the mechanical head had convinced Walt to move forward with One Nation Under God, focusing the attention of the Imagineers on the show's proposed star, a winkin', blinkin' Abraham Lincoln.
Winkin' blinkin' Abraham Lincoln, huh? I just cannot. I'm sorry. The concept of Abraham Lincoln fucking winking at me is a little bonkers. Like, like, why is he winking at me? Methods of control. Do you suppose that God is mad at Walt for creating man? I'm sorry. Do you suppose that God is mad at Walt for creating man in his own image?
In 1860, sculptor Leonard Wells Vogt convinced the Republican nominee for president, Abraham Lincoln, to visit his studio in Chicago. Lincoln agreed to allow Vogt to create a life mask, a plaster cast of his head and face. This was a common practice at the time, and the most accurate method of capturing the likenesses of prominent figures for use in busts and sculptures. Vogt applied the thick plaster to Lincoln's face, waited 1 hour, and then asked him to remove the mold. Lincoln took hold of the mask and began peeling it off his skin. The unique shape of Lincoln's cheekbones made the removal difficult, and several hairs that caught in the mold had to be pulled before the mask could be taken off. Despite this, the mask was clean and in one piece. Vogt was now in possession of the only life mask of the man that would soon become the 16th president and one of the most prominent figures in American history. Vogt would send a copy of the cast to his son's art teacher, John Leon Jerome, in Paris, who gave it to another sculptor, Truman H. Bartlett. Vogt would give the original cast to his son, who would give it to his friend, Wyatt Eaton. Years later, magazine editor Richard Watson Gilder would raise money through his subscribers to buy the cast from Eaton to donate to the National Museum. As a perk, each subscriber would receive a casting from the original. Over the next 75 years, casts would be circulated and duplicated, bought and sold, until eventually, one landed in the hands of Los Angeles-based wax museum owner, Catherine Stuber. Around 1960, Stuber was approached by a Disney artist named Blaine Gibson. Gibson was a sculptor himself, and he was very interested in Lincoln's life mask, as well as the process that Stuber used to create her figures. Stuber was hesitant, assuming that Walt Disney was going to create a wax museum in Disneyland. She told Gibson, quote, "If I tell you all this stuff, you're going to compete with me." Gibson eased her concerns. Walt was not interested in creating a wax museum with the Lincoln mask. He was interested in something much different.
Oh, it's gonna be worse, babe. Don't even worry about it. Don't even worry about your little wax thing going on. We doing worse shit over here. Don't.
The advancements on the mechanical heads had rekindled the development of the One Nation Under God show and the Hall of Presidents. Walt hired James Alger, a documentarian who directed Disney's True Life Adventure series, to draft a script for the show. Alger wrote and recorded a 32-minute narration for the proposed attraction, and Walt began presenting it, along with several pieces of concept art, to potential sponsors. While the presentation was impressive, no company would agree to a partnership based on the script and drawings alone. Walt believed to secure financial support, he needed a prototype of one of the animated figures. Walt needed a functioning mechanical president. Walt briefly considered starting with George Washington or Teddy Roosevelt, but he instead chose to move forward with his favorite commander-in-chief. Walt Disney had developed an admiration for Abraham Lincoln at an early age, and his interest in the 16th president had followed him into adulthood. Walt was well read on Lincoln, and those close to him attested that his knowledge on the subject was impressive. It was no surprise that when given the opportunity to begin work on a single president, Walt chose Lincoln. The Imagineers started by constructing Lincoln's head, picking up where they had left off with the Chinese philosopher. Blaine Gibson sculpted the figure's face, using the life mask as reference. Skin was created, again using the Duraflex material, and glass eyes and false teeth were sourced to bring realism to the mechanical president. While sculptors and machinists worked on the physical construction of the figure, other members of the team began experimenting with an equally important element, a programming system. Up until this point, the talking heads created by the Imagineers had been operated live with joysticks and similar manual controls. Some of these control mechanisms were custom built, utilizing technology that had been developed for aviation. Despite being state-of-the-art at the time, these controls were clunky and unreliable, and the method was only suitable for testing and demonstration. For One Nation Under God and other shows, the goal was to create an entire stage play that could be activated at the push of a button and played dozens of times per day. The Imagineers needed a way to record, store, and play back the figure's movements. The first attempt at such a system was developed by Jack Gladish and utilized two things that were abundant at the Disney studio: film stock and moviolas. Moviolas were film editing machines that allowed an editor to play back the film while working, but Gladish would use them for an entirely different purpose. Instead of exposing the film stock to light and capturing a series of images, Gladish simply used the film as a canvas. On the surface of the film, Gladish brushed conductive silver paint. He then attached a connection to the moviola so that when the reel was played, a contact would graze the film's surface. When the silver paint would touch the contact, a circuit would be closed, causing a solenoid to be activated, resulting in a single action. When the silver was absent, the circuit would open, causing the solenoid to return to its resting position. This ingenious, albeit crude method was already far better than the programming systems that most automatons used. The duration of a camshaft program was only as long as it took for the cylinder to complete one rotation, while Gladish's film stock method could fit hundreds of feet of programmed information onto a single reel. Multiple shows could be created and swapped out by simply changing the reel of film, with no need to change the mechanisms of the animated figure. Unfortunately, the system also had plenty of issues. For one, the silver paint began to chip rather quickly, and the program needed to be repainted constantly.
Yeah, I could see that because, like, it's having to rub to open the circuit, right? So, yeah, I could definitely see it, like, wearing down very, very quickly and constantly.
Second, this was not an efficient way to store information. Only 6 tracks of paint could be placed onto a single reel, meaning that only 6 movements could be programmed onto each moviola. Walt was constantly asking that Lincoln be capable of performing additional, complex movements, which meant more mechanisms, and therefore, more tracks needed to control them. If this method were to be used for Lincoln, an entire room of moviolas would need to be dedicated to the programming. If it were to be used for all of the presidents, an entire warehouse of moviolas would be required, each of which needed to be synchronized perfectly with one another every single show. Gladish's system was a huge step forward, but a more advanced system would still need to be developed for the attraction. Walt continued to request that additional nuances be installed in Lincoln's face, and as a result, the head was becoming quite heavy. This clashed with another of Walt's requests, that Lincoln would start each show seated and then rise from his chair to deliver a speech. Walt enlisted Mark Davis to work on the figure, having him focus on all of the mechanisms below the neck. Davis already had an interest in human anatomy, and after joining the team, he began studying prosthetic technology. Davis recalled that, quote, "It was the British who had done the most work on prosthetics, how to make an artificial hand or an artificial leg, because Britain had been bombed so heavily that there were more people in need of that there than in other countries." Davis compiled his research into a booklet. This was filled with theories and sketches of how the team might accomplish animating Lincoln. Davis explained, quote, "It was rough, and the most terrible thing was that Walt wanted Lincoln to be pretty sophisticated. We didn't have the technology for it. I have a notebook that I did, How to Build a Mechanical Man, and all of this was wrong. We weren't building a mechanical man. We were building an illusion of man. That took a while to soak into me, and into everybody else." In 1960, Walt began negotiating with major corporations to build Disney attractions at the 1964 New York World's Fair. This was an opportunity to showcase the talent of the Disney organization to East Coast audiences and develop new technology for Disneyland using sponsorship money. Walt was interested in finding a sponsor for One Nation Under God and debuting the attraction at the fair. However, the Imagineers informed him that the technology necessary to operate the entire Hall of Presidents show was at least 5 to 10 years away. Development continued on the animated figure as Walt saw.
I mean, also just having him sit down and stand up or stand whatever it's a lot, man. It's difficult. Like, just have him sit and or stand, not both. Sorry, sit or stand, not and or stand to give his thing.
to secure partnerships for other attractions at the fair. At the same time, Walt and the Imagineers continued to make improvements to Disneyland. In early 1960, Disneyland management flagged the Pavilion restaurant as a venue in need of a refurbishment. Since the restaurant straddled Main Street USA and Adventureland, the theming was inconsistent throughout the dining space and the menu. To solve this, Walt tasked his Imagineers with creating a tea room themed to Polynesia. John Hench drew concept art of the space, and the art prominently featured birds in cages suspended above the heads of diners. Walt rejected the idea, believing that the birds would defecate in the guests' food. Hench pivoted and claimed that the birds in the art were actually mechanical birds. This idea was approved, and development on the Enchanted Tiki Room began.
Hey.
The restaurant borrowed many elements from the Chinatown restaurant concept, including the format of the dinner show and the use of programmed animated figures. As automaton makers had been doing for thousands of years, the Imagineers took advantage of the unique properties of birds, finding it much easier and quicker to achieve lifelike movement with the tiki birds than the Lincoln figure. Still, Walt demanded more naturalism than had ever been achieved with mechanical birds. Specifically, he wanted the birds to be able to puff out their chest as they sang. This was a particularly difficult task for designer Harriet Burns, who had to find a fabric that allowed for this motion. As with the talking heads, solenoids would be utilized. These were placed inside of the bird's back and would give the birds the ability to quickly open and close their beaks. However, solenoids were too jarring and limited to provide all of the realistic movements that the Imagineers wanted to achieve. To accomplish fluid motions, pneumatic tubes using pressurized air were designed. A pressurized air system would be housed outside of the showroom, and tubes would be routed into the mechanical birds. This allowed for stronger, slower motion, which the Imagineers could easily customize by changing the pressure of each individual action. Like the solenoids, these mechanisms were digital, meaning that there were only two states: activated and resting. A joystick control was created for the birds, revealing the range of motion of the fully articulated characters. The joystick control had two buttons, one on the top of the handle that puffed the bird's chest, and one on the base that opened the bird's beak. Tilting the top of the handle forward nodded the bird's head. Pushing the entire lever tilted the bird's body, and rotating the handle side to side turned the bird's head. A few of the bird's movements were designed so that it had two extreme activated positions, with a resting position in the middle. For instance, while the joystick control and the pneumatic pressure gave the appearance that an operator could turn the bird's head gradually in either direction, in reality there were only three positions: resting, which in this case was looking forward, activated left, and activated right. The movement could not be stopped between these positions. Thanks to these advancements, the Imagineers were building the animated figures for the Tiki Room restaurant quicker, cheaper, and more predictably than any of the mechanical human figures. Because of this, the dinner show starring the singing tropical birds was fast-tracked through development. The only missing component was a reliable system to record and play back the performance.
I was about to say, yeah, like having each bird, of which there are multiple birds, like have to be piloted by a joystick and a person? That's a lot, man.
The necessary breakthrough finally came thanks to a unique collaboration between several departments at the Disney studio, with the sound engineers, electricians, and machinists working together to create a custom programming system for the figures. This new method controlled the animation, not with paint, but with sound tones. In order to understand how this worked, it is necessary to understand the basics of sound recording. Sound is produced by vibrations. Human ears have a thin layer of skin, referred to as the eardrum, that responds to these vibrations and converts them into electrical signals. These signals are sent to the brain, where they are processed as a sound. In order to replicate this process using a machine, a mechanical eardrum, known as a diaphragm, responds to the sound waves, and this movement is converted into an electrical signal. The electrical signal travels along a wire and to a recording head. The recording head passes over a tape coated with a magnetic material. As it does, the electrical signal alters the orientation of the magnetic particles, imprinting the signal onto the tape and recording the sound. For playback, the process is reversed.
Technology is crazy, man. I don't understand any of this. Like, I'm gonna be honest. Like, it works and that's great and I'm happy for it. But like trying to explain this to me, and he's trying to do it in the easiest way possible, and I'm still like, how do we accomplish this? How is this a thing? How have we figured this out?
A playhead reading the stored magnetic information, converting it back into an electrical signal, and sending it to a diaphragm. This diaphragm
Yeah, science.
and vibrates, producing the sound that emits from a speaker. This process of recording sound has more uses than simply audio playback, and the engineers at the Disney studio devised a way to utilize this technology to create a system to control the animated figures. Instead of using a microphone to capture sound waves and convert them into electrical signals, the live controls that the engineers were using, such as the joysticks, already controlled the figures using electrical signals. Just like sound, these signals could be recorded and stored onto a magnetic tape. If the signals from the live controls were played through a speaker, they would likely not sound pleasant, producing fuzzy, buzzing tones similar to electrical noise. Instead of sending this electrical signal through a playback head and to a speaker, the signal could be sent to a machine. This way, the Imagineers could use it to program the mechanical figures. When a tone was detected, it would activate a mechanism on the figure. This system functions similarly to the silver paint method, but the process was already a significant improvement. For one, the magnetic tape would not flake off like the silver paint. Additionally, the Imagineers could now program the figure's movements in real time, as opposed to before, when they were estimating the timing when painting with the silver. Magnetic tape recording had been around for decades by this point, and recent advancements had made the process more efficient. Master tapes were now often separated into 8 different tracks, meaning that 8 actions could be easily programmed onto a single master tape. This was already an improvement over the 6 actions of the silver paint method, but still not nearly enough to program a single figure, let alone a stage full of them. The Imagineers needed to fit multiple actions on a single track of audio. Luckily, a method to do this had already been created by aerospace engineers, who developed the technology for aviation and the space race. To understand this process, it is necessary to understand a bit more about sound waves. Sound waves.
Buddy. I'm just kind of like, my dude, understanding, listen. I'm not understanding any of this. It's all magical bullshit to me.
Waves are characterized by amplitude and frequency. When visualized, amplitude is the height of the wave and determines the amount of energy that the wave carries. In sound, this translates to loudness and volume. Raise the amplitude, the sound becomes louder. Lower the amplitude, the sound becomes quieter. Frequency is the number of cycles the sound wave makes per second, measured in hertz. In sound, this affects the character of the noise. A higher frequency is perceived as a higher pitch or tone. A lower frequency is perceived as a lower pitch or tone. A simple sine wave such as this would result in a single consistent tone, which is very rare in nature. Most sounds are made up of many waves of varying frequencies that combine into a complex wave. For instance, if 3 tones occur at once, one with a low frequency, one with a mid-range frequency, and one with a high frequency, the resulting compound wave would look like this. More complex sounds, such as a fully orchestrated music track or the human voice, have even more detailed sound waves. This combining effect is a natural occurrence, so the Imagineers could easily place multiple sounds onto a single track. When recording the figures, the Imagineers assigned each action its own frequency. For instance, the tongue on the mechanical head might be controlled by a tone with a frequency of 350 Hz, while the corners of the mouth might be controlled by a tone of 400 Hz. The sound engineers needed to distribute the frequencies throughout the tape's recording range, so that there was enough buffer between the actions to avoid interference. After all of the frequencies were recorded, they would naturally form a compound sound wave, but the individual information was not lost. It just needed to be decoded. The method to separate the actions on playback required a set of metal reeds, arranged in a bank. This appeared similar to a xylophone, and the process was not dissimilar to the musical instrument. In a xylophone, each key produces a different tone, determined by the size and shape of the key. In the reed bank, each metal reed is tuned to respond to a different tone. When a reed registered its resonant frequency,
I'm gonna be 100%. I'm 3 hours, 45 minutes into recording, or into stream. I feel like my brain is melting. I'm trying very hard to, like, keep up with what he's talking about, but I'm like, I just want to take a nap right now. Like, I'm just like, my brain is melting out of my ears. Like, this is all very interesting, don't get me wrong, but, like, oh my god. Like, this is cool as hell that all this, like, how all of this works. And he's trying so hard to explain things as simply as possible. But I'm like, fuck, yeah, I'm back at school. Man. Okay. Okay. Woo! Alright, it's fine.
Vibrated, closing a
Also, yeah, like his tone and how he talks and the speed of which he talks is very relaxing, unfortunately. Like it's sending me into a state of zen, which is making me drowsy as hell. Like it's literally, this isn't the first time I've watched a Defunctland where I was like, his voice is very soothing and relaxing. So yeah. I'm also worried that I'm not like talking very much during this video. I don't know. How long are we on? Yeah, I feel like I'm not reacting very much because I'm just sitting here like zoned out and trying to absorb as much information as possible. Yeah, I'm so sorry.
circuit and triggering an action. For instance, if the Imagineers chose to control the corners of the mouth using a frequency of 400 Hz, a metal reed would be created to respond to frequencies of 400 Hz, and this reed would be connected to the circuit that controlled the corners of the mouth. The electric sound signal from the master tape was sent to the entire reed bank. Each reed listened to the entire range of sound, but could only respond to their assigned frequencies. This new method allowed for 10 to 20 actions per track, meaning that an 8-track master tape could have as many as 160 actions on it. The animated figures that utilized this system of audio tones were given the name Audio-animatronics. The term animatronics was a combination of animation and electronics, but the audio part has a disputed etymology. The most common explanation is that the audio in audio-animatronics refers to the sound that emits from or near the figure. The fact that the animated figures can produce sound and synchronize their movements with it is what makes them audio-animatronics.
I wonder how the new animatronics work. You know?
Sometimes, though, Disney and the Imagineers working on the project have said that the audio in audio-animatronics is derived from the fact that the figures are controlled by audio tones. To illustrate this confusion, here's a clip of Walt Disney and a bird disagreeing on the origin of the term.
Audio for sound.
See, and electronically animated by sound. That's what he's trying to say.
While 160 actions might seem like more than the Imagineers would need, it was still not enough to control an entire show. On top of the animated figures' actions, space needed to be dedicated to the program's audio tracks and lighting controls. The final piece to addressing this issue would be another system created outside of the Disney studio, a technology developed not for entertainment, but for nuclear war. The Imagineers utilized systems originally invented for the Polaris submarine-launched ballistic missile. There are mixed reports on exactly how Disney acquired this technology.
I was about to say, how the fuck did he get military technology that was created for nuclear ballistics? Like, how did he acquire that? Like, I know, especially today, Disney got connections and money. Yeah. But back then, like what?
And what exactly the technology was. Some sources claim that the information had been declassified. Some say that Walt purchased the patents from private companies, and a few imply that Walt might have been given the information by his internal contacts within the US government. That said, it was not a secret that Disney was utilizing technology developed for Polaris. In fact, the primary source that they used it at all was Walt himself, who explained in interviews that, quote, if the government hadn't done all the research, it would have cost us a fortune to develop the system. This made for a great headline, but the exact technology borrowed from the nuclear missiles was more practical than it was compelling. Most reports indicate that the technology that derived from Polaris was a 14-track tape system. This nearly doubled the number of actions that could be used in a show. Finally, the system could handle the amount of programmable material that the Imagineers required. There was just one more feature needed to bring the animatronics, specifically Lincoln, to life. In order for the Lincoln animatronic to rise from his chair, hydraulics would be implemented into his frame. Hydraulics are mechanisms that use the pressure of fluid to achieve movements. This was the best option for heavy machinery, as unlike magnets or air pressure, hydraulic fluid does not noticeably compress when force is applied. Hydraulics would allow Lincoln to accomplish demanding tasks, such as standing up and lifting his arms. They also had another key advantage over solenoids and pneumatics. Hydraulics could perform continuous analog movements, while solenoid and pneumatic valves were only capable of binary or digital movements. Hydraulic valves could be made to stop at any point between its two extremes. This required a slight variation in the programming method. While the pneumatics and solenoids responded to the presence or absence of a tone, the hydraulics responded to a change in voltage. A resting position for each movement was determined, along with a corresponding resting voltage. When the voltage was increased, the mechanism would move in one direction in response. If the voltage stayed at that level, the mechanism would remain in that position. If the voltage was decreased, the mechanism would move in the opposite direction. The combination of these mechanisms, along with the
Man, science and robotics is crazy. Because like, I'm just like, what the fuck do you mean? Like, how?
complex programming method made human animatronics feasible. Still, it was a daunting task to finish one. And while it continued on the Lincoln figure, the new programming system would be put to use in the Enchanted Tiki Room. Despite originally being designed as a dinner show,
Tiki Talk say, better go, wondrous food, wondrous show.
The Tiki Room had become so complicated and impressive that Walt felt it deserved to be its own attraction. The new show would feature 225 animated figures, including crooning birds, singing plants, and chanting totem poles. Even with hundreds of possible actions, the Imagineers still needed to get creative with the show's programming. The show's 4 hosts were given more actions and a wider range of movement than some of the background birds, and several characters shared programming with one another to save room on the tape. Of course, all of the complicated systems and delicate machinery were completely hidden from guests, and when the attraction debuted at Disneyland in June of 1963, it was pure magic.
All the birds sing words and the flowers scream in the tiki 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 room.
The room came to life in a way that had never been seen before, and yet, this was only the beginning of what audio-animatronics could achieve.
The resurrection of Abraham Lincoln. Surely God would not have created such a being as man with an ability to grasp the infinite to exist only for a day. No, man was made for immortality.
In April of 1962, Walt Disney gave a tour of the Disney studio to the president of the upcoming 1964 New York World's Fair, Robert Moses. Walt was planning on bringing multiple Disney attractions to the fair, and he and Moses had developed a professional relationship as the event approached. Wanting to impress Moses,
How are you gonna bring multiple attractions to the fair? Like how? Like what? How? How were you gonna do that?
Walt offered to give him a preview of a secret project.
I mean, I guess build them, yeah, but like, Jesus, that's so much. Like, I don't know. I'm the type of person that's like, okay, build it and then like build it in place and then like be like, okay, cool, it's set here and it works here and everything's fine and it's secure here. And like, if something breaks, we have it like kind of mapped out and we can figure out like, okay, it's probably broken around this area, right? You know, fucking dismantle the whole thing and just set it in another place. I don't know.
Not only was the Lincoln animatronic a secret to those outside of Walt Disney Productions, but it had become a secret within the organization as well. Conflicts had arisen between the electrical engineers and the sound engineers, partly due to the rules of their respective unions. Walt, who famously had little patience or respect for unions, had decided to move Lincoln to a secret room at the Disney studio in January of 1962, allowing only his inner circle, namely Wathel Rogers, Jack Gladish, and Mark Davis, to continue work on the figure. As was customary with Walt's special guest drop-ins, the team was given little time to prepare Lincoln for the demonstration. When Moses entered the secret room, the Imagineers, operating the animatronic live, had Lincoln rise from his chair and reach out his arm. Moses shook hands with the 16th president in complete disbelief and declared, quote, "I won't open the fair without that exhibit." Walt informed him that the figure and the rest of the Hall of Presidents would not be ready in time, but Moses was insistent. The animatronic had to debut at the fair. and after some convincing, Walt agreed. Abraham Lincoln, 100 years after his death, was going to New York to deliver a speech.
Well, good luck, Imagineers. You have a time limit, and you better get at it. Like, get it together.
Moses had persuaded Walt to bring his Lincoln animatronic to the World's Fair, but convincing a sponsor to fund the expensive exhibit would prove to be more difficult. The One Nation Under God show, with its Hall of Presidents, would be far too expensive for any one sponsor, and the Imagineers were still struggling to get one president operating reliably, far from the 34 required for the attraction. Walt decided to scale the show down to showcase just the Lincoln animatronic, who would deliver an address directly to the audience.
If you ain't working until you literally pass out and then someone else comes and takes your spot, you ain't working. Get it. Get it together, y'all. Get it together.
This caught the attention of the state of Illinois, the self-proclaimed Land of Lincoln, who were interested in sponsoring a state pavilion at the fair and potentially including the animatronic Lincoln as the main attraction. Illinois state officials were flown to California to view the figure, and like Moses, they were more than impressed. By August of 1963, a deal had been made. The state of Illinois allocated $1 million for their pavilion, with a significant portion going to the Lincoln figure. Disney had requested $600,000 to deliver and maintain the animatronics for the 2 seasons of the fair. And after some questionable accounting assistance from Moses, the arrangement was finalized and announced to the public. This is when the protests began. Concerns over animating a real historical person had existed since the impetus of the project. While monuments and wax museums were common and featured realistic 3-dimensional depictions of historical figures, replicating and animating a dead person was another story. Some historians believe Walt might have been inspired by an attraction at the 1933 Century of Progress Fair in Chicago, referred to as the Talking Presidents. This show featured figures of 6 U.S. presidents delivering pre-recorded speeches. These figures did have the ability to stand, but they likely had no animation beyond this. There's no proof that Walt saw this show, and the attraction was not widely reported on at the time. Therefore, the first time that the public would truly ponder the ethics of animating a historical figure would be with Walt's Lincoln animatronic, and the descent began within the Disney organization. Imagineer Harriet Burns initially believed, quote, "No, we can't do the presidents. They actually existed. If we make a mistake, everybody will know." Sculptor Blaine Gibson explained, quote, "My feeling was that we shouldn't be fooling with something that Americans considered to be historically sacred."
I see both their points. I do like this one. It's like, listen, okay, if we take something that Americans are like, this is America history, okay? And we do something that some of them are not gonna like for whatever reason, like they're like, no, that's not real. We are in deep boiling water. You feel me? Like they are gonna come after us. All right, we are gonna be in danger. Okay, they gonna get us. You can't. I like this dude's like, we're gonna die. If we do this wrong, we are in danger. This dude very much got a point.
When Walt showed the prototype to a minister, he was aghast, responding, quote, "It was all right for you to bring fairy tales to life and for you to create a human-like mouse, but to create a man, that's usurping the powers of a higher authority." These initial objections were just the beginning of the flood of criticism the project would receive upon announcement. Newspapers in Illinois called the concept of a Lincoln robot grotesque. The Herald and Review deemed it, quote, "a cheap carnival trick that would demean the memory of Lincoln and degrade the Illinois exhibit." Walt and Moses traveled to Illinois to give a presentation on the project to the state legislature in hopes of quelling the negative press. Walt explained at the meeting, quote, "I have more at stake in this than the state of Illinois. I am staking my reputation on this, my integrity. I am not a carnival operator." Walt's presentation helped to ease some concerns, but it did not dispel all criticism. One person that attended the presentation argued that, quote, "It's almost as ghoulish as the idea to play a mock recording of the voices of the 4 presidents enshrined at Mount Rushmore." Another scoffed, quote, "The next thing they'll have Mouseketeers giving guided tours of the White House." Newspaper columnist David Feltz penned a scathing criticism of the figure's creation, writing, quote, "The very idea of a life-size figure of Lincoln, fashioned from fiberglass and plastic, animated and given a tape-recorded voice, is revolting even if the figure should be exhibited only in a wax museum on a carnival midway. But that such a macabre effigy is to be the central attraction of the Illinois exhibit should stir vigorous protest here in Lincoln Country. Walt moved.
I mean, I could see people being very, like, unsettled about it in general. Like, I get it. Like, especially, like, during this time where it's like, oh my god, there's people pretending to be gods here. Like, you know? Like, they're... Also, like, how do I know that they're not gonna replace somebody? Like, I get it. Like, it would be scary. Now, we have, like, AI. So, like, the whole... Like, take in consideration that someone could make AI of you, not even just your voice, like a video, right? Of you doing something. Like an absolute recording of you doing something, except it's all created through AI. Like, it's scary, right? Sure, they had like the same kind of vibes back then.
Forward with the project despite the pushback, and he would end up building 3 additional attractions for the fair, each of which prominently featured audio-animatronics. PepsiCo's UNICEF Pavilion would feature It's a Small World, a boat ride through scenes in which the children of the world sang in harmony. Most of the characters in the ride were simple mechanical figures animated using cams and levers, but a select few were programmed with magnetic tape and synchronized with the ride's music. Ford's Magic Skyway, a road trip through time, would feature mechanical cavemen and dinosaurs. Like It's a Small World, not all of the figures in the ride would be audio-animatronics, but the few that were would add dimension and energy to the respective scenes. General Electric's Progress Land would feature the Disney attraction at the fair with the most audio-animatronics, the Carousel of Progress, a direct
Carousel of Progress. Also a good place to take a nap if needed. Just saying.
Evolution from Edison Square's Harnessing the Lightning show, the Carousel of Progress would follow a family experiencing the evolution of technology throughout the 20th century. The Imagineers designed and constructed 32 audio-animatronic figures for the attraction. While all were controlled by the show's master tape, some figures were more simple than others. As with the original pitch for the attraction, these basic figures would only be seen for a short time, and the characters were designed to appear as if they were operating a household appliance. Other animatronics in the show would be complex and would remain in view for several minutes. John, the father of the show's fictional family, had 30 unique programmable actions, and 4 versions of the character would appear throughout the attraction, one in each of the show's 4 acts. Recording the performance of the human animatronics turned out to be much more difficult than recording the Tiki Birds. There were 3 main methods the
Okay, that's unsettling though. Like, it's just like, you know, it's unsettling because they make it like pretty freaking lifelike, and you could see it's not connected to a body, but it's moving, and that does weird stuff to your brain. Your brain's like, oh my god, that's a severed hand and it's moving. Like, you know.
Imagineers used to record the animatronic performance onto the tape. The first was
That said head or hand. That's a severed hand.
the joysticks. These were used mainly for the Tiki Birds, but they could be used for human animatronics as well. The downside to this method was the limited number of actions that the joystick could control, and the awkwardness of puppeteering a human with the handheld mechanism. The second method was controlling individual actions by turning knobs or adjusting sliders on a board. This would eventually become the standard way of programming Disney's animatronics, with custom control consoles designed to assist in the process. However, these consoles would not be created until after the fair opened, so the primary method for recording human animatronics for the fair attractions would be the third option, the most interesting method. For the Carousel of Progress, John and other members of the family were programmed by the Imagineers, mainly Wathel Rogers, using a specially designed control harness. This device was prominently featured on Disney's television.
Oh, what are they called? It's like early mocap suit? Crazy.
Special covering the fair attractions, and Walt acknowledged its strange look to the audience.
Now this contraption here might look like something from outer space.
While many have speculated that this method was faked for television, Wathel Rogers and others have confirmed that it was real, functional, and apparently as painful as it appears. The benefits of the control harness were that multiple movements could be recorded at once, and that the programmer was performing similar body movements to the ones that they wanted the figure to replicate. The drawbacks, though, far outnumbered the benefits. The programmer's movements were not directly copied to the figure, with the harness not being sensitive enough to perfectly replicate the range of motion. As a result, the actor needed to exaggerate their movements to make up for this.
The operator of the control harness has to be a bit of a ham actor, as you can see.
Because the hydraulics position was determined by the tones, the programmer needed to start and finish their performance in the same position, or else it would cause a jump in the voltage, causing the figure to spasm. In order to get the exact performance, the programmer needed to be in the harness for several hours, rehearsing and recording the movements again and again until it was properly recorded onto the tape. All of the actions could not be recorded at once, so the scene had to be performed by the programmer several times, each take focusing on a different category of motion. A mouth harness was also created to capture jaw movements, in order to match the figure's mouth closer to the vocal performance. The Imagineers would spend hours and hours recording different aspects of the animatronic onto tape, before combining them all onto a submaster. Only after doing this would the
I mean, honestly, though, it's extremely inventive, creative, and like, I don't know, like just bonkers to think about. Like, hey, we need to be able to make like lifelike movements. Let's make like a fucking suit that's not going to do it perfectly, but like better than nothing, better than what we have so far. That's mind-blowingly insane. Like I don't even, like, how do you even... Yeah, and now I'm like a fucking VTuber and I don't have to put anything on. It's set in front of my phone and it works because other people did the work for it. But still, like, that's insane. That's, my brain's melting. That's, damn.
Imagineers be able to see all of their work put together. Dozens of actions, such as the moving of limbs and the timing of the mouth, all recorded separately in isolation, needed to be synchronized to create a convincing illusion of life. If the timing of one or more of the actions was off, the Imagineers could adjust the timing of the tape. But if this was not enough to solve the issue, Rogers would have to put the harness back on. He recalled, quote, "I remember times when I was in that harness so long, with everything so tight and so tense, that I'd come unglued. I don't think I've ever recovered from some of that stuff." While the
Damn. Dude is traumatized. He also looks just out of it and exhausted.
recording process was tedious and uncomfortable, the result was mind-blowing. The Carousel Progress's narrator was capable of speaking, blinking, turning his head, lifting his arms, and more. One thing he could not do was stand up, and he appeared seated in all 4 acts. John was the most complex audio animatronic that guests could view when the New York World's Fair opened on April 22, 1964. But that was only because one audio animatronic was not working. As the fair approached, the criticisms of the Lincoln animatronic continued to surround the upcoming attraction. Walt's response to the objections remained consistent. His defense was his dedication to an authentic portrayal of Lincoln, almost as though if he were somehow able to perfectly reanimate Lincoln in a way that was indistinguishable from the real human man, there would be no reason to object to such an endeavor. This did not stop journalists and the public from debating the ethics of the animatronic, and some questioned why the robotic animation was necessary to the show at all. Even Blaine Gibson admitted that he initially believed that, quote,
that has to be It's a Small World, like, thing, like, doll thing. They're so creepy. Like, they're unsettling. I will give, the one in Disneyland is more impressive than the one in Disney World. And part of that, I think the one in Disneyland is, it might be bigger. But, like, I think Disneyland has, like, Disney characters in it. So, like, you'll be going through and you'll get to, like, the Germany part. And, like, Rapunzel from Tangled is in there. Or, like, Little Mermaid's in there. And so you could play, like, I Spy as you go through the ride to try to figure out, like, oh, where's, like, the different Disney characters in each scene. So, like, that's neat. And I did enjoy that. But, like, I don't know. They're just unsettling.
"It seemed like it was something that could be done much better by actors. I just didn't think we could do it in an acceptable way." Interpretations of Lincoln by live actors was commonplace, both in theater and in film and television. These performances were often praised and were viewed as respectful portrayals of the 16th president. So why did Walt not go this route for the Lincoln show? In hindsight, the suggestion feels preposterous. Walt and the Imagineers had spent 5 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars developing the animatronic. Of course, they wouldn't throw all that away and proceed with the Lincoln impersonator. But to the public that was hearing of the show for the first time, and that were not aware of all the work that had already been done, it was a valid question. Of all of the audio-animatronic attractions created for the fair, the Lincoln show was the most questionable use of the technology. The cavemen in Ford's Magic Skyway and the dolls in It's a Small World were on simple loops, too tedious and repetitive for an actor to perform. Plus, these were cartoonish, stylized depictions of humans. Some Imagineers had suggested doing the same with Lincoln, hoping that if the animatronic appeared more like a caricature, the public would be less critical of the depiction. Walt rejected the idea, demanding, quote, "No, I want him to breathe. I want him to be alive." The Carousel of Progress.
Like, I get it. He has, like, a vision, but, like, dude, you don't super have the technology. And I know the idea is, right, they're developing the technology, but, like, you still have limitations, and some of that limitations is just, like, how small you can make certain things, or how, you know, smooth you can make certain things, right?
Featured realistic human figures, but the show required these characters to instantly transition between sets, costumes, and appearances. In this case, the omission of actors was understandable, as the technology was being used to accomplish something that actors could not. This was not the case with the Lincoln show. The show that would debut at the fair, titled Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, was simply Abraham Lincoln, alone, in a theater, delivering a speech. Why could this not be an actor? Why was Walt doing this? Apart from a personal passion for the technology, one of the arguably benign reasons was also Walt's main defense: realism. No human actor, even with prosthetics and makeup, could have the build and facial structure of the real Abraham Lincoln. The Lincoln animatronic, on the other hand, was sculpted from an actual life mask, and his body and face could be constructed to look identical to the real president. However, it wasn't. The Imagineers learned quickly that real did not always appear accurate. For instance, Gibson made subtle changes to the animatronic's face, specifically sculpting more pronounced cheekbones, to better acclimate the figure to the public's collective memory of Lincoln's appearance. Another example of this distortion was the figure's height. The real Lincoln was 6'4", which was considered very tall, both in Lincoln's era and in the early 1960s, and also today. However, when the figure
just which is considered tall. But no, in the 1960s and also today. Sorry, just the way.
Was initially constructed to be 6'4", a common complaint from those previewing the animatronic was that Lincoln did not appear tall. The Imagineers decided to alter the figure's height to 6'7", distancing the animatronic from Lincoln's actual stature.
I mean, I get that. The dolls in It's a Small World don't look that big, but we just saw somebody like working on one of them, and they're like huge, right? And it all has to do with like perspective, right? Like how close are you to it, how far away from you are, like, etc.
But bringing him closer to the public's understanding that Lincoln was exceptionally tall. A similar liberty was taken with Lincoln's voice. For many decades, the public had assumed that Lincoln, known for his famous orations, had a deep and strong voice. By this point in the early 1960s, this misconception had been well corrected, and it was then common knowledge in academic circles that Lincoln had a high-pitched, shrill, bordering on unpleasant speaking voice. Despite this, Walt decided to go with actor Royal Dano, who gave a deep and somber performance. During the recording session, Walt over-directed Dano, forcing him to do countless takes until an authentic exhaustion came through in the vocal performance. These are just a few instances in which Walt and the Imagineers were more concerned with building a figure that was accurate to the public's expectations of Lincoln, rather than designing one that was identical to the real human being. Even if the animatronic could achieve a closer resemblance to the president, a human actor could behave more like the real Lincoln, as the real Lincoln was a human being. As impressive as the animatronic technology was becoming, it was nowhere near achieving the subtlety and range of motion of a real human. Walt's incessant requests for additional mannerisms did not let up, and he would often come into the studio with a new facial expression that he wanted Lincoln to mimic.
I just know they wanted to hit that man. I just know every time they looked up and saw him walking through the damn door, they were just like, I swear to God, I might quit today. Today might be my last day. This might be my final reason. Like, I just know they were sick of him. Like, him coming in how many times being like, I had a new idea. And they're like, shut the fuck up and walk out. Like, oh my God, if I wouldn't get fired. Like, do you want the animatronic or not? Like, I just... Let us finish what we got going on first, okay?
As a result, Wathel Rogers had to put so many mechanisms in the head that he had to ask Blaine Gibson to sculpt a bump into Lincoln's skull, which would be carefully hidden by the animatronics wig. The extra machinery allowed Lincoln to have 17 different facial expressions, but unsurprisingly, it was still limited compared to an actual human's face. So if it wasn't realism, what was the benefit of using the animatronic in Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln? The most obvious is that the technology was the star of the exhibit. Simply having an actor pretend to be Abraham Lincoln was not nearly as compelling as seeing a state-of-the-art robot pretend to be Abraham Lincoln. Walt sometimes claimed that the fact that it was such a unique experience would motivate audiences to listen closer to Lincoln's words than if they were being delivered by an actor. But this was not the only explanation he would give. In private, Walt acknowledged that he had some ulterior motives to the animatronics technology, but it is difficult to tell how serious these statements were. Jack Gladish remembers Walt admitting, quote, "I'm tired of finicky actors. I want to develop a fully animated, articulated human being to use in place of motion picture actors and actresses." Disney artist Frank Thomas believed that Walt's resentment toward his animators might have played a part in the animatronics development.
Rip Walt Disney, he would have loved AI. Fuck.
Recalling, quote, "We always felt that he never really knew how you animated, and he resented this to a certain extent. He always kidded about it. He'd tease us and needle us about, I'm gonna figure out a way to replace you guys, particularly if he got his animated figure starting to work. He'd say, I'm going to teach them to animate, the first thing I'm gonna teach them to do." With all this kidding constantly, you knew there had to be something in the back of his mind that was bugging him. On one occasion, Walt argued that the animatronics were necessary for the logistics of a theme park attraction, explaining, quote, "You can't have human beings working 3 or 4 shifts. We can't afford to pay them, or they'll make mistakes, or somebody won't show up. We've got to figure out a way to have automated shows."
Fucking rip Walt Disney, he would have loved, like, modern day automation and fucking modern day AI, I guess.
Again, this reasoning, while true for the other Disney attractions at the fair, did not necessarily apply to Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. The format of the show would have required an actor to speak for around 5 minutes, with around a 10-minute break in between. It would be highly unlikely that using multiple actors, even with makeup artists and wardrobe assistants, would have been more expensive than the animatronic, which cost between $500,000 and $1 million to build. Adjusted for inflation, that's $5 to $10 million today. And as far as a human actor not showing up for work, the animatronic was far less reliable, as evidenced by the fact that the...
Oh my God, it is 2026, okay? The fucking animatronics at Disney, the fucking new ones, still break down constantly. Constantly those bitches be breaking. So, like, you want to talk about, like, real life human actors are finicky, and what if they don't show up to work? Bitch, what if your fucking animatronic just, like, decides it's just broken today? Like, I don't know what breaks it down, but they be breaking down. Like, somebody looked at it wrong, and it's broken. Like,
Lincoln animatronic was not functioning when the fair opened. Realism, cost, and reliability might have all been pretext to obscure the true benefit of the animatronic technology in the eyes of Walt. His frustration that actors make mistakes and that they are finicky is evidence of his well-documented perfectionism and desire for control. The animatronic technology allowed him to literally dial in the exact performance he wanted. The mannerisms, the expressions, the timing could all be determined. There was no performer to interpret, to adjust, to adapt. Walt didn't need an actor to bring Lincoln to life through their craft. Walt could bring Lincoln to life. Perfectly. Every time. Like a machine. Actually, a machine. There is one more theory as to why Walt
I sneezed too hard in the break room hallway and half the park shut down. Oh my god. You say that. You say like, oh, the machine broke down, we're gonna fix it. Sometimes they decide it's not worth fixing because it would cost too much money, or it would be too much of a pain, or it would have to take too long to fix it. And I'm specifically looking at the fucking Yeti on like Expedition Everest and Animal Kingdom that has been broken for like, I don't know, the majority of the time that ride has existed. And I think it broke a couple of times, and a couple of times they tried to fix it. And the last time it broke, they were like, we can't really fix it without having to take a bunch of shit apart. So we're just going to put a strobe light on it and pretend. Like, it just, sometimes it's not worth fixing it. The broken Yeti adds character. I'm just saying.
Decided to carry the torch of humanity's age-old search for mechanical life. Not for money, or power, or even control, but for no discernible reason at all. What if Walt was not aware of his own motivations? What if it was simply something inside of him? The same thing that had driven automaton makers to experiment with the craft for thousands of years. Some innate curiosity, drive, ego, something deep inside, not just Walt, but humanity itself. There is some credence to this theory. When National Geographic reporter Robert DeRoos visited to view the progress on Lincoln, he asked Walt, quote, "Is anyone else doing this kind of thing?" To which Walt responded, quote, "I don't know anyone crazy enough." When New York's Parks Commissioner Newbold Morris asked Walt why he was doing this, Walt responded, quote, "Because I can't stop."
I mean, there's also like, what is it? The whatever fallacy where it's just like, I've already cost sink, whatever. It's like, I put a lot of money in this already, so sunk cost. Thank you. Sunk cost. You know what, chat? Thank you for always having my back when I can't think of words. When the frog takes my vocabulary. Yeah, that one where it's like, listen, I already put a lot of money into it. And like, I think the people working on it are gonna murder me. So like, if I just cancel it, I feel like it's gonna go badly for me. I was looking at chat. Pandora's box. He is as lifelike as I am standing before you. Perhaps more so.
On April 16th, 1964, Lincoln passed his final testing in California and was shipped to New York City. The Imagineers,
where he was broken in transit just because he rattled a little too much. I don't know. like I said, I'm sorry. The freaking, they just break.
then rushed to configure the show in the Illinois Pavilion. Lincoln was scheduled to deliver his first speech on April 20th at a preview for dignitaries and special guests of the fair. However, when Lincoln was installed and the Imagineers began testing, he did not work. The figure would go into fits, flailing his arms, freezing, and on at least one occasion, overshooting his chair and smashing it to pieces. There are several theories as to what the exact issue was. The most common
he vibrated a little bit too much in transit.
Story is that the power supply at the fair was different than the one that the Imagineers used when programming Lincoln in California. The fair's power supply was unreliable and experienced constant fluctuations. According to John Hench, these surges would change the electrical signals and cause Lincoln to go into spasms. The Imagineers pulled 20-hour days in an attempt to get the figure to work in time for the preview, to no avail. When the day came, a full room of special guests were already seated to watch the show when Walt was informed by his team that Lincoln could not perform. Walt walked out onto the stage and delivered the bad news to the audience. The 1964
Oh, I bet he was pissed.
Or New York World's Fair opened without great moments with Mr. Lincoln, and the Imagineers scrambled to get the attraction operating as soon as possible. Walt and the team refused to debut the figure before it was fully ready, knowing that if the animatronic were to malfunction, this would only add fuel to the controversy surrounding it. With this in mind, the Imagineers developed clever solutions around the figure's unpredictability. Originally, the resting position of Lincoln was seated, and when a malfunction occurred or an input signal was lost, the figure would quickly return to its seated position. This often resulted in Lincoln slamming into his chair, causing an abrupt and unsightly end to the show. The solution was to change the figure's resting position to be upright, so that when something went wrong, Lincoln simply remained standing. This way, the show could be stopped, with Lincoln retaining his dignity and saving the cost of another replacement chair. Additional safeguards were added to the attraction, such as CCTVs so that the operations could watch the show and quickly shut it down if a malfunction occurred. After over a week of long, stressful recalibration sessions with the figure, the Imagineers were able to get the animatronic to perform correctly.
I will say it's so fucking frustrating when you try to do something and it's like, oh, this place doesn't have the power draw you need, or the internet strength you need, or the whatever the fuck you need. And like, it's fine and it works perfectly like at home or whatever. But now that you're in this other place where there's a whole bunch of other people and everything's a little different, suddenly it doesn't work. It's usually Wi-Fi related. Either way, it's annoying as hell. Like, it's just super frustrating. Like, Jesus.
Mark Davis recalled, quote, "Mr. Lincoln went through his performance, and God, not one glitch. We wanted to hug him. The only thing was, you couldn't go up and hug a big piece of machinery like that because it could kill you.
Oh, good.
This thing had 500 pounds of hydraulic pressure. It could kill you. Sometimes you worked on it and forgot that it wasn't a human being. This thing could floor you." Of course, this certainly never stopped Walt from messing around with the animatronics. In fact, it's somewhat of a miracle that he didn't get his hand ripped off by one of these things. Perhaps they knew better than to mess with him. 2 weeks after the fair opened, on May 2nd,
There's like a fucking Imagineer like sweating at the control booth, like holding a button down so like the fucking animatronic doesn't rip off Walt's hand or something.
1964, Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln officially debuted, and audiences were finally able to witness the reanimation of the 16th President of the United States.
The world has never had a good definition of the word liberty.
Even before its first performance, the attraction had already been deemed the most controversial exhibit at the fair, but many skeptics left the show impressed. The Imagineers programmed Lincoln to behave in a very subtle, dignified manner. Selective dynamic lighting assisted in the illusion, highlighting the most impressive aspects of the figure while hiding many of its defects. The script that Alger and Walt had landed on also received praise. The speech was not the Gettysburg Address, which the two felt was too predictable. Rather, a script had been written that incorporated excerpts from several of Lincoln's addresses. When initial reviews were published, the voice performance by actor Royal Dano received more criticism than the animatronic figure. Although some reviewers believe Dano achieved Lincoln's high-pitched, nasally voice better than other impersonators had. While the press was warming up to the animatronic Lincoln, the general response from the public was disbelief. Some people that were unaware of the premise of the attraction simply assumed that the machine was a real person. Imagineer Gordon Williams recalled people in the lobby after the show speculating, quote, "I bet that guy gets tired after doing that all day," and, quote, "They must have more than one actor, and they take turns." Some were so convinced by the illusion that they misremembered Lincoln doing something that the figure could not have possibly done, such as one reporter who claimed that the animatronic had the ability to walk forward. Some even believed that Walt Disney was lying, and that Lincoln was a human actor pretending to be a robot. A few guests went as far as to throw things at the figure to see if it would flinch, but most were simply spellbound.
Why am I not surprised that someone's like, tee-hee, I'm gonna throw something at it? Like, could you not? Like, just don't. Asshole.
It was common for audience members to become emotional, as if they were really seeing the 16th president in person. Abraham Lincoln's great-grandson, Robert Todd Lincoln Beckwith, attended the attraction, reportedly watching the show 3 consecutive times, crying during each viewing. Science fiction author Ray Bradbury would praise the animatronic, writing, quote, "In such an age, it would be foolhardy to ignore the one man who is building human qualities into robots. Robots whose influence will be ricocheting off social and political institutions 10,000 afternoons from today. Disney has set the history of humanized robots on its way toward wider, more fantastic excursions into the needs of civilization." While the general consensus was that the Lincoln figure was impressive,
Give the audience a warning. The animatronic Lincoln can kill you.
and respectful, it would be inaccurate to claim that all criticism vanished. Journalist Mike McGrady wrote, quote, "What it is, it's a thing. It's a thing that looks and acts precisely
It's a thing. Correct.
as Abraham Lincoln would have looked and acted if he'd only been a robot. The face,
Sure. Okay.
stretched over a rigid plastic base, reflected all the subtle emotional variations of a drowsy goldfish. In his review,
Wow.
McGrady claims that
Damn. Yeah, okay. There's only so much they could do with the face.
the audience he sat with was unimpressed, with one patron saying, quote, "It was disconcerting. He didn't seem to know what he was saying," with another adding, quote, "Certainly it's sick, 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 but it's also fascinating. With just a few refinements, Disney can make human beings obsolete." One editorial writer, Ralph H. Johnson, wrote that the Lincoln figure was, quote, "dignified but seemingly arthritic," questioning, quote, "Why could not a real-life actor have spoken the lines?" The answer, of course, is that the exhibit would have been a flop. Its success depends upon its appeal as a freak show.
Damn. But yeah, I mean, like, yeah, an actor could do that, and you'd be like, yeah, that's an actor and he's doing his acting thing. Cool. Even if it's like an emotional deliverance, it's still like, yeah, that's a person doing a bit, right? Like, I get it. The fact that it's a robot or an android or whatever the fuck is what makes it kind of stand out and makes it, like, unique.
Try as the inventor might, cold death will not surrender Mr. Lincoln. Novelist John Gardner argued what made the, quote, "obviously dead figure horrible was the ghastly suggestion, which had never occurred to Disney and his people, that all religion and patriotism are a sham and a delusion, an affair for monstrous automatons." In Richard Schnickel's derisive book, The Disney Version, he claimed, quote, "Disney, caught in the grip of his technical mania and protected by his awesome innocence about aesthetic and philosophical matters, had brought forth a monster of wretched taste. Are we really supposed to revere this ridiculous contraption, this weird agglomeration of wires and plastic? Here is the dehumanization of art in its final extremity."
Incorrect, sir. Are you still alive, Richard? Have you not seen what we have done? It is worse today in the year 2026. I almost said 2000. 2026. We have made it worse than ever before.
Criticisms of Lincoln's robotic resurrection persisted, but overall, the public was more excited about the possibilities of animatronics than they were concerned with their moral implications. Thus, the age of audio-animatronics had begun, and the world was quickly populated with a new breed of mechanical life. After the first season of the fair, the Lincoln animatronic was moved to Disneyland, where it would perform in the Opera House on Main Street. A new and improved figure was built for the fair's second season, and by the summer of 1965, Walt had 2 Lincoln animatronics performing simultaneously, one on each coast. After the fair concluded, the Carousel of Progress and It's a Small World would be moved to Disneyland, and Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln became a permanent fixture of the park. Toward the end of 1965, Walt had diverted much of his attention to his plans for a city of the future, his experimental prototype, Community of Tomorrow. But when he was developing ideas for Disneyland, animatronics were a core element of the new attractions. Several concepts that had been in the works for years,
Hey, Haunted Mansion.
such as a tour of a haunted house or an encounter with a rogues gallery of pirates, evolved
Pirates of the Caribbean.
into expansive immersive rides, in which guests would be flanked by dozens of audio-animatronic characters. In preparation for the attractions, a new system to program the animatronics was developed. This was in part to find a balance between the simple looped mechanical figures, such as the ones on the Jungle Cruise, and the complex audio animatronics that were developed for the fair. Both Pirates of the Caribbean and the Haunted Mansion would be continuously moving rides, with guests passing through show scenes in boats and Omnimover vehicles. This meant that, like the Fantasyland dark rides and the Jungle Cruise, guests would only be able to see each scene for a short time before their vehicle moved on to the next part of the attraction. The magnetic tape was well suited for programming audio-animatronic stage shows because it allowed for a long program of movement that could be wound onto a reel. This meant that a show could have minutes worth of programmed animatronic information and their accompanying audio tracks easily played back, but it also required the reel to be rewound before being able to play again. This was not an issue for Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, as there was a break in between shows when the theater would empty and the next group would enter. During this time, the reel could be rewound and ready to play for the new audience. For Carousel Progress, each of the 6 theaters, Load, the 4 main acts, and Exit, would all share the show's master tape, and each scene needed to repeat immediately after the theater rotated. To solve this, a 2-phase system was created for the show, so that while one tape was playing, the other was rewinding. Apart from this workaround already being complicated, this master tape system was not ideal for the new animatronic rides. For one, Pirates of the Caribbean and the Haunted Mansion would have far more animatronics than the Carousel of Progress. Pirates would end up having 119 total figures, 64 of which were humans. The Imagineers had already found it difficult to fit the programming information for the 32 Carousel of Progress animatronics onto a single tape, so information storage alone motivated the creation of a new system. Additionally, every new animatronic needed to be programmed, and the methods used for the fair were uncomfortable and not
That dude's eyes are like, don't make me ever do this again. Don't do it. Not gonna do it. Like, he's so oh, I feel so bad for him.
always reliable. Finally, the new rides would feature a completely different audio setup than the stage shows. With Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln and the Carousel of Progress, the audio was coming from one direction, so each character did not need to have its own audio track. It's a Small World sent guests through rooms in which they were surrounded by sound, but the audio was uniform throughout each room. With the new rides, the Imagineers wanted many of the characters to have unique dialogue,
like
with the sound
misread.
emitting from near the character's location, as if the guests were really surrounded by pirates and ghosts. For all of these reasons, a new method of programming was developed. The new system would be inspired by the camshafts used by the automatons of the past, but with a space-age twist. The Imagineers would use large aluminum discs, which would be slowly rotated so that the edge of the disc would pass between a light and a photodetector. The photodetector was capable of producing an electrical current when it received photons from the light. The disc would block the light so that no photons reached the photodetector. The animators then manually cut ridges into the disc, allowing the light to pass through whenever they wanted a mechanism to be activated on the figure. This system
Oh my god. That just seems so tedious.
could also control analog mechanisms that needed voltage regulation. In the magnetic tape system, this was controlled by the amplitude of the sound wave, but in the photodetector, the varied voltage would be determined by the amount of light that could reach the photodetector. Therefore, the two extremes of a mechanism would be when the photodetector was fully exposed and when the light was completely blocked. If the animator wanted the mechanism to stop somewhere in between, they would cut the disc so that the light was only partially blocked. This also allowed for some control over the speed of the movement, because the animator could allow the light to be quickly exposed or blocked, or be more slowly exposed or blocked, depending on how the disc was cut. In this system, each disc controlled only one body action, so cabinets that could hold the discs in a vertical arrangement were created. These cabinets had enough room to stack 28 discs, and they would turn at a constant rate so that one full rotation would occur every 60 seconds. This would be a long enough program that guests passing by the scenes could not detect the loop, but not so long that time and space were being wasted. The final element was synchronizing the sound with each figure's motions, and synchronizing each figure with one another. The magnetic tape system had synchronization built in. One track would be audio, and the other tracks would be the programming information. With the cam rack system, the Imagineers needed a way for sound to be played in a loop, synchronized with the spinning discs. Luckily, Disneyland had already been using loopable magnetic tape since it opened for sound effects and ambient music. These repeater mechanisms sent the tape through a long path before repeating, so all that the Imagineers needed to do was install one of these repeaters that was calibrated for 60-second loops to match the rotation of the programmable discs. The finale of both attractions would feature 2 ensemble musical performances, sung by the animatronics. The 2 theme songs, Yo-Ho, A Pirate's Life for Me, and Grim Grinning Ghosts, would be written so that the music and lyrics lasted exactly 60 seconds, so that they could be perfectly looped along with the spinning discs. Different animatronics would sing different parts in unique voices, so that when the ride vehicles pass through the scene, the guests perceive the song as changing and evolving, when in reality, all of the animatronics were on a 60-second loop. The guest was merely moving past voices and instruments that they had already heard and closer to ones that they had yet to hear. To avoid all of the different characters becoming unsynced, a signal was sent when each cabinet finished a rotation, and the next rotation would not begin until all of the cabinets had returned to the start of their loop. This would sometimes result in a small moment of silence between audio loops, but this was typically not detectable by guests. The new cam decks had many advantages for the Imagineers that resulted in a unique guest experience. However, there were several obvious downsides to the new method. The cam cabinets were huge and required significant storage space. With the magnetic tape, 10 actions could be stored on a single track, but with the cam decks, 10 actions required 10 aluminum discs. The cutting of the discs was also an annoying process. Not as painful as the control harness, but not as simple as pushing a button. The aluminum discs themselves would also wear out, requiring maintenance that often could only be carried out by WED and not the park's operations team.
They can't still fucking use that. Like today, they can... No. They can't still fucking use that, right? That's so... Again, tedious. Just... I mean, it's... Again, it's an innovative idea that they did that. But like... I mean, but the issue is it does break. It does break. It wears out and they have to replace it.
The cam deck method was another serviceable but imperfect method of controlling the animatronic figures. Predictably, it would not last for long. In late 1966, Walt Disney was diagnosed with lung cancer. In November of that year, Walt underwent surgery, and a portion of his left lung was removed.
Jesus.
On the day he was discharged, he visited WED in Glendale to view the progress that his Imagineers were making on the numerous projects in development. Outside of the work being done on Epcot, many of these updates involved progress on new audio-animatronic figures. Mark Davis, who is now leading the creative development on Pirates of the Caribbean, showed Walt the Imagineers' most impressive animatronic figure to date, a pirate auctioneer. Davis lamented that the figure's sophistication would not be appreciated, as the boats would float by the scene so quickly that guests would not have a chance to appreciate the subtlety and complexity of the character's movements. Walt reassured Davis, explaining, quote, "We get so much repeat business here, that means each time we come down, we'll see something we haven't seen before." The Imagineers were also working on a renovation to Disneyland's Tomorrowland area, including plussing the Rocket to the Moon simulator. The attraction would be given an impressive pre-show, hosted by an animatronic flight director. Finally, Walt had been considering plans for a ski resort in Mineral King, California. Davis had been tasked with creating an animatronic show
Freaking Country Bear Jamboree!
for guests of the resort's lodge. The concept was that a group of bears had formed a musical band and were putting on a revue for guests. Walt loved Davis's concept for the show, laughing at the drawings during his visit to WED. After Walt had been briefed on all of the projects, he asked to be taken home. On his way out, Walt turned to Davis and said, "Goodbye, Mark." This was Walt Disney's last time at WED. He passed away 3 weeks later. Immediately following Walt's death, rumors began to circulate that Walt had been cryogenically frozen, to be thawed out at a later date when his illness could be cured.
Like immediately after? Immediately following Walt's death, the rumors, yeah. So just immediately after, like, they put his body on ice.
That Walt had been cryogenically frozen, to be thawed out at a later date when his illness could be cured. One tabloid journalist claimed to have snuck into the hospital room where Walt was supposed to be on his deathbed, only to find him floating, frozen in a metal tube. Other sources claim that Walt had asked to be frozen, but the request was ultimately denied.
I'm just wondering if they, like, broke in and for some reason he was in, like, a fucking iron lung because they removed part of his lung and they were trying to keep him breathing or some shit. And he's like, they're freezing him! But he's just in a fucking iron lung. Like, you know?
As the rumor spread, first throughout Hollywood and then around the world, urban legends were spawned. Some claim that it was only Walt's head that was preserved. Others claim that the freezing chamber is located under the Pirates of the Caribbean attraction that opened just 4 months after his death.
Have you guys heard like the conspiracy theory that the reason why I just broke my hair clip. The reason why Walt Disney made a movie called Frozen was so that if you Googled Walt Disney Frozen, you get the movie as opposed to stuff about Walt Disney's cryogenically frozen head.
The rumor had become so prevalent, such a staple of American pop culture, that reportedly, in 1983, soon-to-be Disney CEO Michael Eisner asked Walt's daughter Diane Disney Miller at a dinner, quote, "Is he," before Diane interrupted him, saying, quote, "I know what you're going to ask, and no, Dad isn't frozen." There is little evidence that Walt was aware of cryogenics, and no evidence that he had requested it. In reality, Walt was cremated, and his ashes were placed in Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. The story that Walt had been frozen was merely tabloid gossip. The idea that someone whose products were so seemingly innocent and whose persona was so wholesome had undergone such an eerie and grim treatment was amusing to the masses. But there was also something specifically about Walt attempting to use experimental science to escape his own death that was believable. After all, he was a well-known futurist. Walt had speculated on space travel, built monorails and people movers, and designed and almost constructed a city of the future.
I love the people mover. I wish the people mover was longer or that there were like more people movers around the parks. I'm not even gonna lie. Like just like here's the Tomorrowland Land people mover. Here's the I don't know, fucking Fantasyland people mover. I know it would break the immersion, whatever. I just really like the people mover.
Though it may have been the development of audio-animatronics that had propelled these rumors most of all. In the minds of the public, Walt had been placed among those who toyed with the idea of life itself. Certainly, if Walt could use technology to bring Abraham Lincoln back to deliver a speech in the year 1964, Walt could use technology to cheat death himself. But this wasn't the case. His fragile, mortal body had failed, and then it was turned to ash. Walt was dead, gone forever from this mortal plane. And the bitter irony was,
I don't know, Defunctland. You're trying real hard to convince me that he was cremated, I feel. Like, I think you're trying real hard.
that the only resurrection available to him now was the very one that he had developed. In the years following Walt's death, his brother Roy and the rest of Walt Disney Productions carried on with his Florida project, delaying development on Walt City of the Future and focusing on building a new theme park. Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom was conceptually identical to Disneyland, with the most obvious difference between the two being Magic Kingdom's larger scale. Like Disneyland, the new park would have its own Main Street, Castle, Adventureland, Frontierland, Fantasyland, and Tomorrowland. Several attractions were cloned for the park as well, with only minor changes differentiating the Magic Kingdom version from the Disneyland original. With all of the duplication, Disney was motivated to create a few standout experiences that were exclusive to Walt Disney World. In these cases, the Imagineers relied on concepts that Walt had proposed but never built, and the 3 attractions chosen would all be audio-animatronic stage shows. The Country Bear Jamboree, originally pitched
Freaking Country Bear Jamboree. I keep bringing it up. I've only seen it once. It has since been renovated since I saw it, so apparently it's better now. I don't know. But I saw that, and first of all, the songs made me feel uncomfy. Like, why? Second of all, you could hear them blink. I know that's not a big deal, but they had like a deer and a moose head. Like, I think it might have been 2 deer. Either way, they were like what you would consider like taxidermy animal trophies above the exit doors, right? And they're there the whole fucking time. And they talk to one another. I think they talk to the audience, but I know they talk to one another. Like, they just kind of give information specifically between the acts, like before the Country Bears come out, and then also like kind of between the acts, because there's like multiple little songs or whatever they do. You can hear those motherfuckers blink. You can hear the click of them blinking. It drove me insane. I was like, first of all of this is like making me feel like I need to climb the walls. Second of all, I can hear those motherfuckers blink. And you can hear them blink throughout the entire fucking show. Second of all, the song choices are uncomfortable. What the fuck? And third, I just don't want to be in here anymore. They look really unsettling. Like, it was my fucking nightmare. The clicks are gone. You can't hear them blink anymore. Okay. Yeah, I was like, holy shit, I never want to do this again. Like, I'm just, Ooh, I hated it.
The Mineral King Ski Lodge would perform for guests in the park's Frontierland. The Mickey Mouse Revue, a performance by characters from across the Disney canon, was another animatronic show that Walt had considered. The show would be placed in the park's Fantasyland.
Oh, they've changed that to like the Philharmonic or whatever. It's like a 3D show now.
The third animatronic show would perform in the Magic Kingdom's only unique themed area. Liberty Square was an evolution of Disneyland's never-built Liberty Street, complete with its signature attraction, the Hall of Presidents. Walt's ambitious dream of having 33 presidents share a stage had finally been realized, with 3 bonus presidents, as 3 more people had held the office since the idea was conceived. The star of the show would be another impressive Abraham Lincoln figure, with more limited animation being given to the rest of the presidents. This was Disney's first time creating animatronics that directly mimicked real living persons. Harry S. Truman and Lyndon B. Johnson were still alive at the time of the attraction's debut, and the sitting president, Richard Nixon, was also sculpted, animated, and included among the representations of all the presidents that had preceded him. If there had ever been a true debate over whether or not Disney should make robots of dead people, the pro-robots of dead people camp won handedly. Not only were 33 of the 36 figures depicting people that had passed away, but the attraction featured animatronics of John F. Kennedy, whose assassination had occurred less than a decade prior, and of Dwight D. Eisenhower, who had died just 2 years prior to the show's opening. But as with so many things in human history, there's only a brief window of time to prevent something that is new from becoming something that has always been. The Abraham Lincoln animatronic had normalized the process of mechanical resurrection, at least in the minds of the American public. Despite initially being labeled as a sideshow, Walt and the Imagineers had turned Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln into a program that was seen by many as a respectful tribute. Sure, there were passionate and compelling critiques at the time of its debut, but the overall consensus was positive. So much so that when the Hall of Presidents opened, there was no great debate, no significant pushback or scathing critiques, because it was nothing new. Of course, Walt, the Imagineers, the Disney company, can sculpt and animate a dead person. They always have. Has it not always been this way? It should not come as a surprise that the elaborate animatronic stage shows of the Magic Kingdom would only be possible thanks to a new programming method. All of the work and innovation that had been done to create the magnetic tape system and the camrack system would be made obsolete by this new method, a method that would enable people all around the world to build and program animatronics. A method that is still being used today.
It's just so unsettling to see it. I mean, to be fair, it would also be unsettling to see like a person without skin. Like,
And might owe its origin, in part, to the early age of automata. In 1819, Wolfgang von Kempelen's chess player was on tour, challenging chess masters and dignitaries to games in front of live audiences. While the Turk's secret would not be revealed for several decades, the machine was not without its skeptics. One spectator, English mathematician and philosopher Charles Babbage, was impressed with the Turk as a trick, but was unconvinced of its touted ability to reason. However, the spectacle reportedly inspired Babbage to dream of a machine capable of such logical skills. In 1822, Babbage designed a device he referred to as the difference engine, a calculating machine credited as the precursor to the modern computer. The computer would not just be the new way to program animatronics, it would be the key to unlocking the next phase of mechanical life, a living machine that appeared not just to move like a human, but to sense like one, to respond like one, to think like one. There's something inside of us, and we let it out.
Alright. And now, I think Paris, Disneyland Paris has the free roaming Olaf. That I think they only use in parades now. I feel like, sorry, I just feel like this part is loud. Like, it's just like super loud. What's ominous, the fact that it said end of part 1, like there's another part. There's so much information, he had to split it up into multiple parts. I don't know if it broke. I know it fell over. If it did break, I wouldn't be surprised based on what I said about every single Disney animatronic constantly fucking breaking. So, like, you know, that's just kind of, it is what it is. Okay, do I see anything fun? It's going too fast. I can't read. I can't read this quickly. Sex Wedge Benjamin R. Brisson. Alright. Supersonic Dude. Tumbleweed. Tootie the Fruity. Zillers. Okay, anyway. Thumping Wumpus? Maybe. Walt Disney will return. In some way, shape, or form.